Number 4, 2018. Please note that everyone is here and present. If I can have everyone stand for the opening prayer by Vice Mayor McKee, and please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day and this opportunity we have to come and serve you in this town. Be with each and every person in this room today. Be with all the citizens of Arlington, that whatever decisions we make is always in the best interest of the town. Be with the people that are sick, that can't be here, and be with our military and our first. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Mr. Allen, since this is your last meeting, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the August 6, 2018 meeting? Motion by Mr. McKee, second by Mr. Harmon. Any discussion or questions? Any objection to approval of the minutes? Seeing none, that item passes. Next up, we have grievances and comments from citizens. This is where we allow anyone to come forward and speak on any particular topic. We will give you up to 3 minutes to talk. Please note that it's not necessarily a Q&A, we will try to answer your questions if we can during the meeting, but you may not get the answers, but staff will make notes. And also, we prefer no personal attacks if possible. So if anyone is here to speak on any particular topic, now we do have a public hearing. We have 2 public hearings tonight. 3, excuse me. So if you're here to speak on one of those public hearings on one of the items on the agenda, we'd prefer you wait and speak during the hearing on that. But if you want to talk on any other topic right now, it's your right to come up and talk. So just by show of hands, anyone here to speak right now? Yes, ma'am. Just come up and state your name and address for the record.
Allison Doty, 5849 Polk Street. And I emailed each and every one of you already. But my concern is of the new addendum to chickens and waterfowl. I've lived here for most of my life. I grew up on 20 acres not far from here. I now own a home here in town for the last 9 years. And we do raise and show chickens. And my son is very involved. He has multiple medical issues where he is not able to play contact sports. And this is something that keeps him involved. And this is not, hey, we went to Tractor Supply and we bought $2.99 chickens. Okay, I have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars invested in these birds. And if you guys change the rules, because we moved to this house because we did not want to be in a homeowners. There are homeowners associations that already say no chickens over 5 hens, okay? And so I feel like they can kind of handle that themselves. And now the town's taken on this, and for us, that puts us in a bind because I have hens that are over 6 years old. They have lived here their entire lives. And so for us to have only 6, we take more than 6 to show, every show. And we spend a lot of money going out of town, taking all these birds, prepping them months and months in advance. So I just want you guys to have an informed decision about that because it will affect not just people that want to have 4 or 5 chickens for eggs, but it is something that will affect my child also. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you.
And life is better.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak on any particular topic at this time? All right. So we will close the public comments for now until the public hearings. And we'll move on to communications from the mayor. Sheriff's Department report. I think I was behind you driving down Airline Road. Thank you, Lieutenant.
You're welcome. My name is Lieutenant Kathy Crowder, and I'm here to present the report for the month of July 2018. That's the Sheriff's Office crime report. We had on a total of 17 reports for the month of July. There's a decrease of 9 reports for the month of June. We had a robbery of a business, and the address was 11017 Highway 70. That was at the Shell gas station. 2 male blacks entered the business. The clerk was there, but she was not injured at all. The suspect was able to get away with cash money. We have surveillance video of the suspects who committed the crime, and it's an ongoing investigation that's being handled by our Detectives Division. The second incident that we had was a burglary from a business, and that address is 5055 Erline Road. That was at the Cinco gas station. It happened due to early morning hours. The detectives made the scene with the business owner and was able to look at the surveillance video. And that was 2 male blacks, suspect just as well, and that's an ongoing investigation. Overall, our crime report is down for the month of July. We thank the citizens of Arlington for helping us out to bring those numbers down. And we really do appreciate it from the Sheriff's Office. That's all I have to report.
Thank you, Lieutenant. Any questions for the Sheriff's Department report? Thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
Appreciate you. For those of y'all who are looking at the agenda from the audience, we are having to remove item B, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineer. We had a tragic accident with one of the presenters tonight, and we appreciate everybody keeping him in his prayers, and we appreciate that. Chief Harville, Fire Department report.
Good evening. This will be your monthly activity report for the month of August 2018. Fire Department made a total of 97 calls. 58 of those were EMS responses. We were given automatic aid 4 times. We rendered automatic aid 4 times and received automatic aid 11 times. Vice Mayor McKee had asked for a breakdown of calls on and south of Interstate 40. We made 11 calls south of Interstate I-40 and 6 calls on Interstate 40 in the month of August. Some special calls that we made last month is, of course, everybody knows the large fire that we assisted with automatic aid in Lakeland. Had a near miss with a collapse. All 3 of our guys made it out safely, though, which was very encouraging. We also had a residential fire with a dryer over on Misty Trail and a commercial fire over on Jetway. Crews handled flawlessly. We had 2 calls where we were on other calls and automatic aid came into the town and rendered in our absence. We made a total of 12 inspections, 1 smoke alarm check, and we hung 2 smoke alarms. We also did several days of training within the town of Arlington, including discrimination awareness, as well as active shooter training here in this spring.
You've heard the chief's report. Are there any questions for Chief Harville? I have one, Chief, just on that, the fire, we talked about it last month. I know Lieutenant Ross had a video. Is that something that will be used for training or something that will be available? I don't know if the board's really been able to see it, or I don't know if he's posted it anywhere. If it's just one of those private, it's private. So just if the board hasn't seen it, I suggest you stop by and look at it. It's I've been, Chief's been in a lot of fires, but it's to see ceilings that are 30 feet high come down on you, and it's pretty. I don't want to say impressive, because that's what words we use on the fire department. It doesn't. The fear that we have is a little different, but it's very frightening for those if you haven't seen it before. So.
And as also just to follow up on that, Mayor, a good note. That building was in excess of 8,000 square foot. So you see, while we try to adhere to our building code sprinkler, anything over 5,000, even a 5,000 square foot could get away from you quickly. And that would be a great example of how it probably could have benefited had it been sprinkled.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions for Chief? Thank you, Chief. We had, we've got some committee appointments that will be coming up usually in November, but we had one that was vacant due to a resignation, and one that was already had somebody kind of waiting to step up. So I just wanted to bring it to the board that Mr. Kirk Wise, who's also runs our baseball league, has volunteered to step up on the Parks and Rec Committee. And just wanted to make everybody aware of that. Instead of waiting until November, I think there's some work that can be done, and so we're going to go ahead and get him involved. So just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention. I've only got a few things. It's Tanya, 5K is this weekend.
Saturday morning, registration starts at 7, right across the street, Arlington Elementary School, and the race starts at 8. There's the t-shirt, and we've got lots of community fine t-shirt. It's that nice feel.
It is. It's that nice dry fit, light feel type. So
And so you can still register online tonight and tomorrow. Tomorrow registration online closes, but you can come by the chamber office Thursday or Friday. Thursday 3 to 6, Friday 8 to 11. Register in person and pick up your t-shirt and your bag, or on site Saturday morning at 7. The proceeds go to the Arlington Education Foundation. So Ms. Mason wants you all to show up.
Yes.
In big numbers.
yeah, you don't have to run. You can walk, or you can just sign up.
You can sign up and make your $35
Yes.
donation to the Arlington Education Foundation and get a t-shirt.
And just so everybody knows, that morning we also have the Relay for Life right after that. So at 8 o'clock we have the 5K right here at Arlington Elementary. I think the Relay for Life starts about 9:15, 9:30. So it's going to be a big morning over here at the sports garden at the school. So it will be a healthy day. So please, everyone, come out and support both programs if you can. Just so everybody knows, I mean, there's not really much I can say on it because I haven't heard any more, but I think the board knows that I was in Nashville last week for the hearing on the Baptist emergency room. I guess we're waiting to hear from Baptist or the state as to the status of that. They were hoping it would be a few weeks to a month. Originally, it was supposed to be several months, but things been delayed and kicked down the curb several times. I will say it was quite an enlightening experience because it was basically being on. I called Gerald on the way back and said I felt like I was on trial because they play clips from our meetings. They try to make us look bad. One side makes you look good, the other side tries to make you look bad, and all it is we're just trying to be supportive of what's best for our community. So hopefully we'll have some news on that soon. Besides that, I think Mr. Biggs, you had a request for something this next month.
I asked that staff put on the agenda for the Planning Commission to consider, reconsider self-storage in B2 and whether that's something that we want for our town. So I think that's going to be on the agenda next month and will be before us next month as well.
Yeah, it was Mr. Biggs, just so you all know, he was asked for it to be a discussion item tonight, but after talking with staff, it needs to go through Planning Commission first. So we decided to try to just go ahead and get it on the Planning Commission agenda and then bring it back before the board. Is everyone cool with that? Okay. All right. Anybody else have any other announcements? Mrs. Durant? Brittany? Okay. All right. On to Treasurer's Report.
Okay, in our general fund, we had a beginning balance of $2,803,581.44, an ending balance of $2,499,601.70. And in our sewer fund, we had a beginning balance of $1,773,686.02, and an ending balance of $1,759,525.31.
Any questions on the Treasurer's Report?
Mayor, we have auditors next week. If anybody would like to stop by, they'll be remanded for Friday.
So for those, I know this will be a first for you all, I think, won't it? With the auditors here? Yeah. I was just trying. So basically, they'll be set up in the office. They'll be in here, and they like to see the aldermen, the elected officials come in because they'll ask if you have any questions, any concerns. You can talk with them one-on-one. You can ask them if there's anything that they have concerns with, even though they present us with the report. But that's your chance to kind of talk with the auditors, and if there's anything you're not sure about what we're doing as a town, you can get a unobstructed opinion. So, is that good? Why y'all looking at me? Y'all both sitting there?
I was laughing because I was thinking they're a lively group.
Well, accountants always are. So, all right, on to old business. We have the second and final reading of ordinance 2018-08 of the Town of Arlington Municipal Corporation of Tennessee, creating a fire department committed fund balance in order to ensure fund availability for the development of a future fire station. Mrs. Owens.
This is your second and final reading. It is a committed fund balance of $4 million for future fire station development. This does take a
You've heard the recommendation from Mrs. Owens. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion.
Second.
Second.
Everybody.
Bunch of seconds.
All right. So we are now on, let me flip this over here, because we have a public hearing on this. Just for the audience, if you weren't here at last month's meeting, kind of what this basically does in layman's terms is this commits money for a second fire station that will be basically, it's still in reserves, but it's basically allotted, set off to the side that it won't be used for anything else except for that when the time comes. So I just want to make sure everybody understood. So we are on a public hearing. Let me get to it.
Need a motion first.
No, we got the motion in a second. No, that's what I'm saying. We got to get to a public hearing. Do I have a motion to suspend the meeting to get to a public hearing?
Second.
All right. I'm trying to find my. I'm not used to having my paper one here, and I'm going through both of them. All right, here we are. So we are now in a public hearing for the reading of Ordinance 2018-08, the Town of Arlington Municipal Corporation of the State of Tennessee creating a committed fund balance to ensure fund availability for the development of a future fire station. This notice was published in the Daily News on August 10th, 2018. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this request, please stand and state your name and address for the record. Is anyone here to speak on this particular public hearing for the fund balance on the fire station? Seeing none, do I have a motion to close the public hearing and resume the meeting?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Brooks, second by Mr. McKee. Any discussion or questions on this?
It's up to, correct?
It's up to, it is $4 million. It is $4 million,
Not a dollar more, not a dollar less. $4 million. Okay.
and it takes this vote to get in. This is the second reading, and it would take a unanimous vote to change it. Correct. Everyone's clear on that? Okay. Any other discussion or questions? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That item passes. Any other old business? Okay, on to new business. Folks, we have a long agenda. I know it looks kind of long. We're hoping to move through some of this stuff quickly, so we'll be thorough, but we'll try to be prompt with it also. Item A, first reading of ordinance 2018-09 to amend the Town of Arlington Municipal Code Ordinances Title 11, Chapter 4, Paragraph H, Building Operations. Mr. Perkins.
Good evening.
Good evening.
This will be the first reading to amend the municipal code of ordinances in regards to allowing construction work on Saturdays. In the past, construction work has been allowed on Saturdays under certain circumstances to enable construction to progress at a faster pace in order to limit the duration of construction. In our research in surrounding cities in Shelby County, kind of used in measuring other cities kind of as a standard of what everybody else does. Not that we necessarily need to be like everybody else, but you always want to have some standard to measure by. But looking at other municipalities, they pretty much all allow work on Saturdays, usually with some caveat dealing with the hours of operation and whether or not they allow heavy equipment and that sort of thing. In this case, staff is recommending to allow Saturday construction with limited hours from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. With no heavy equipment allowed during the hours available on Saturday to protect against residential areas near construction sites.
You've heard the recommendation by Mr. Perkins. Do I have a motion to approve? Motion by Mr. Pardue.
Second.
Second by Mr. Biggs. Discussion or questions? Remember, this is a first reading, so this is, if you have any questions after tonight or any changes or recommendations, we can get with staff over the next month before the second reading.
Heavy equipment, what is that going to entail?
Well, usually we're talking about, one of the big complaints that we have is dump trucks with the tailgate slamming, those types of things, dozers, any type of heavy equipment is going to make a lot of noise.
Basically, dump trucks, bulldozers, backhoes, things of that nature.
Right.
What about, because you said things that make a lot of noise, so what about like an air compressor?
Well, I mean, I think it's probably going to be a judgment call. If we're having complaints, we're going to take a hard look at that. Other than that,
I picture just, you're going to have Saturdays with laborers that are going to go and they're going to be hammering and that type of thing, but.
well, we've had some issues with loud music and those types of things, and I
Okay.
personally had to put a stop to that. We are going to have to step up enforcement, no doubt, regardless of how this goes. We're going to have to step up enforcement. We're trying to compromise because we understand that there are some citizens who are concerned about the noise, and I certainly understand that. But at the same time, like we said, we're trying to work with the contractors who are trying to get work done and get going, and we would prefer that to happen.
So as a town, are we going to have somebody on call to monitor?
Yes, we're going to work something out to make sure that, we're getting some inspections done on Saturdays during, and it'll be a little easier to handle since you're looking at limited time frames.
I'm concerned, is it, do we save everything for Saturday? When we don't have the inspectors on call.
Well, I mean, we're going to have to work out some schedules, be it overtime or however we do it.
It's going to cost the city more money.
Someone's on call every weekend as is. We're getting those calls now. This helps clearly define what can and cannot be allowed, and in the past, it's just been kind of a free-for-all.
Right.
But you have someone on call every weekend right now.
I just see, I'm just wondering if we're opening up a door for issues.
I think you're closing a little bit of a door, really.
I think it's a good compromise. You're going to allow the work, but it's limited hours. You're not, 9 o'clock to 4 o'clock, so it's not going to be early in the morning when people are trying to sleep and that type of thing. So overall, I think it's a pretty good compromise.
I think staff can confirm this. Most of the complaints that they get on a Monday are usually somebody saying that 7 or 7:30, 8 o'clock, somebody was banging on something. So 9 o'clock, I do think is fair.
Is there a problem limiting this to the interior work on the weekends?
I'm sorry?
Is there a problem with limiting it to the interior work on the weekends?
If it's not disturbing anyone, I don't know that I see a problem with that. I think the main thing we're trying to stop is some of the outside construction. I mean, like I said, with some of the heavy equipment, we've had problems, like I say, with music. Anything that's going to be disturbing the residents. And we have construction sites too that are not in residential areas, and you don't want to penalize those either. But if that's the other thing too, we want to take under consideration that you have homeowners who are going to want to do construction work on the weekends as well. So, we don't want to.
That's
It's
my
hard
question.
to cover every circumstance. So,
I guess that's my question, is because I have, of course, where I live, I got several neighbors with tractors and stuff. So what's considered heavy equipment? They're out doing stuff all the time.
I think this is probably geared.
I know it's
No, I'm saying like
Yeah,
land development compared to.
But it is, but still, it's
right. Yeah, I mean,
if they're
it's
doing
kind of where do you
improvements,
draw
if they're
the line?
doing,
and like
yeah.
I say, I welcome any input, any ideas or.
Yeah, like you said, it's the
input
first
y'all have.
reading, so we're
Yeah.
going to go over this again.
Yeah, so again, my suggestion would be if any questions come up, if any concerns, anything you think of that could tweak it or help it, get with Mr. Perkins over the next month, and then we can address it before the next meeting, and then the next meeting have it presented. Is that
Just
working?
one question that we can do, are we talking about somebody laying carpet on the
I don't see
inside
that as
room?
being a problem. I think the big thing here is noise. I think
I know
in a
it is.
nutshell, what we're
You
talking
were
about is
saying nine
noise.
to four.
And, like I say, under certain circumstances already, we kind of take things under consideration. So if somebody's laying carpet and they're not disturbing anybody, I don't know if we're going to have a problem with that.
nobody's going to complain, right? I mean, nobody's going to call in, so.
It's mainly the big, heavy equipment on a big development usually, but there's always going to be something that comes up. We just have to handle it the best we can. Okay. So
Barn raising early on a Saturday morning. You and your buddies can't build one, right?
well,
Gotta wait till 9.
I don't know. Any other questions for this at this particular time? Again, we get first reading only. Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? That item passes. Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Next up, item B, first reading of ordinance 2018-10 to amend the Town of Arlington Municipal Code of Ordinances, Title 10, Chapter 1, addition of section 10-107, requirements for keeping chickens, ducks, geese, turkey, or domestic fowl. Mrs. Reader.
There. So this is the first reading of a consideration of an ordinance change. Over the past decade, backyard or urban chickens have become more popular everywhere in the United States. People keep them for various reasons. And the town has guidance in place for most any animal you have, such as for your domestic dogs, cats, things like that, to horses, goats, pigs, etc. However, our language in the code currently regarding any type of domestic fowl like a chicken is pretty limited. It really just controls nuisance items right now, so requirements for a limitation on noise, odor, and then health and safety type items. So we do occasionally receive complaints from neighbors regarding noise issues or chickens that are loose in the area, especially with some roosters we've gotten calls about in the morning. So noticing that this language was a little lacking, staff drafted what's in front of you tonight. This would be in addition to what's already in the code. The intent is to continue to allow people to practice having the backyard pets, their chickens, but give some limitations to try to reduce the chance for something that might negatively impact the neighbors. So what this ordinance does is it limits the number of chickens or other fowl that you can have on property under 5 acres in size or that aren't considered agricultural properties to a maximum of 6. Currently, we have no limits in place. So regardless of your lot or where you're located, unless you're in have a homeowners association that restricts it, the town does not have any. It also restricts and places no roosters on residential lots, which there is currently no language regarding that. Restricts poultry or egg businesses on residential lots. Now, this isn't if you've got a few chickens and you're giving your neighbor eggs or telling somebody. I mean, if it's a business to the point where you're filing taxes on it, something like that, it's not something we necessarily expect, but it's just in there as just as a coverall. And then it adds guidance to make sure that any feed that's kept is kept in a container, like a rat-proof container that reduces the chance for any kind of pests that might be attracted to outdoor feed containers and therefore end up on the neighbor's property. This is a first reading of the ordinance. If supported tonight, it would be brought back for a second reading from the board. So.
You've heard the recommendation by Mrs. Reader. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion.
Motion by Mrs. Pardue, second by Mr. Biggs. Discussion or questions? Again, this is the first reading. I know we did have some concerns from a citizen earlier, and if there's anything that we don't address tonight, again, you have the next month to kind of go over it with Mrs. Reader or staff. Any discussion or questions at this time? Mr. Harmon, yes.
I live in the old part of Arlington, and there's a lot of my neighbors have chickens and horses and donkeys and goats, and it's just part of the culture of the old part down there. I guess one of my concerns is whatever our neighbors have in place now, if this ordinance goes in, will they be required by law to reduce the number of whatever they have? Or if they have a rooster, are we going to go in and tell them, okay, well, I'm sorry, now you got to do away with your rooster? Or will this be grandfathered in?
So with regard to grandfathering, it's not the easiest situation to sort out when you have something like this, but I don't think we want to continue it and without knowing who has something. So if we're not told what's in place now, that could always be someone's answer. If we got a complaint and went out to a site, they could say, well, I've had this for years. So there'd need to be something in place if we wanted to allow people to, for example, keep the rooster they had until they no longer have it or for whatever reason. We would need some way for them to let us know when this goes into effect. But I think you would ask for a reduction. But I'll take comments from the board, I guess.
I don't know if you recall, or you might not have lived here, that we had a similar situation. We changed where you could have a horse or donkey. We had one on Walker, and then, lots of lot size we changed, just what we require. That, it was a donkey or a horse, did live for a certain amount of time.
Little pony.
Yeah,
I remember, yeah.
Lived for a certain amount of time, that was grandfather. It's gonna be almost impossible for us to have a grandfather provision on chicken. I couldn't tell that chicken for nothing. I don't know if this chicken's 6 years old or 6 months old. I'm just
Concerned about the fact that, like I said, you know, several of my neighbors actually raised the roosters and show them. So for us to say, okay, I'm sorry, we're gonna change this, so the roosters gotta go with no grandfather provision.
Just to be perfectly clear, staff didn't just wake up one day and decide they wanted to limit chickens. You get a lot of phone calls at town hall from people who are annoyed by the chickens, people who don't take as good care of them as the lady who spoke earlier tonight. Obviously, she's put a lot of time and money into her passion, but there are people who have walked off and abandoned these chickens in their backyards, or they don't clean up the feces. One lady called very upset and very distraught that she had been diagnosed with an illness, and the doctor told her it was from living near the feces of fowl. So it's for those people who aren't following the rules, who staff needs some direction, some teeth to be able to go in and say, you're not keeping these animals in a sanitary condition, you're not keeping them in a manner as to not become a nuisance to your neighbors. So this is based on a year's worth of phone calls that we've gotten, having to do with people who are opposed to these chickens being able to be kept on residential lots. That's why it's been brought to you.
I'm assuming we're not going to go out looking for this. It's going to be addressed as people complain, so.
Sure, we don't have the staff or
Right.
the desire to go search out all the chickens in town. So, yeah, it would be when complaints were received, yes, sir. And it gives us an answer when people call, because we often get phone calls, and I'll be honest, people ask, well, how many can I have? And I say, as many as you want right now, and they're always a little shocked, it seems. So I don't know that that's the answer we want to give out. It may not be 6, but I don't know if we want unlimited to be the answer either, so.
Well, I guess one small concern I had, if we're limiting it to 6, you know, now we're also saying the same thing, that you can't sell the eggs. And then, but you mentioned, well, if it's just, you know, because to me, that's a little bit overreach when, you know, it's almost like you're telling somebody they can't sell lemonade or they can't have a garage sale. If one neighbor wants to sell eggs to another neighbor.
Right, so that wouldn't count. If you don't have to file taxes on it because you're a business, then I wouldn't consider that. If I sell pies at, you know, something around town, or take something in anything else I would make on property. As long, it's just intended, so I'm not slaughtering chickens out back and selling chicken meat at the farmer's market, or, you know, I don't have Walker Street eggs and I take cases and cases down to the local
That's,
market.
I mean, I guess that's my point though. If we're already limiting it to 6, isn't that the only, I mean, that's the only kind of transactions are going to happen. It's not going to be a big business and.
Most likely. I mean, the language could come out, that isn't something we've had an issue with. It's just something that's standard that, you know, it would be a home-based business at that point. You could just use it under that category. We do have codes for home-based businesses, so.
So, Mrs. Reeder, in your research, did you find like 6 was the common number, or is that just kind of a?
That was pretty standard. A few cities had so many chickens per person in the house, which was a strange. So a few of them had like 4 per person, but people come and go. It seemed a lot easier instead of asking how many people are in your home and then getting to this, just to put a flat number on it. So.
Well, Mr. Burke, do you have something? No. Okay. Well, why don't we do this again? This is the first reading. If it passes the first reading, get with staff. If you have questions, if the number wants to change, if there's any recommendations, get with Mrs. Reeder. and we come back next month and we have a, instead of just kind of throwing it around tonight, let's get with it over the next 30 days and try to pinpoint if there's anything that we want to change in here. Is that?
That's fine. I was actually going to address the lady that came up and spoke. Thank you. I'm going to vote yes for tonight, only so I can get information to make a informed decision. So I want you to know, I understand, but I want to do my homework, and I don't want you to think that because the board or whatever up here is voting one way or the other, because it's got 2 readings. And so there's a lot of information that we need to look at. And so I just want you to understand that it's not anything that we're voting completely down, as much as it is we don't want to remove it off where we can't have an informed conversation and discussion and research on it. So I just wanted to say that.
That's why we have a first and second reading usually, is to something's presented, some basic questions are asked, more detail goes in over the next 30 days, and then we either come back and we vote it up, vote it down, make changes, however it needs to be done. So that's kind of the process. Mr. McKee.
If the board next month decides to adopt something, there's nothing wrong with setting a date when it goes into effect also. It doesn't have to be that month. It could be January 1st. It could be whatever the board decides. Correct, Gerald?
That's correct.
And giving people time to adjust their numbers.
Yeah.
Make arrangements, some boarding somewhere maybe.
Well,
So is everyone comfortable with voting on the first reading tonight and then getting their questions asked? Okay.
I'm comfortable voting on it, but I would like to make a statement.
Okay.
I moved to Arlington in '79, and I can promise you this wasn't a question then. But I would trade it every day, the sound of a rooster and the chicken, for the sound of everything I hear in Memphis. The gunshots and the sirens and all that. I'd much rather get woke up by somebody's loud rooster in their backyard. It doesn't bother me at all. So I understand from a health and safety standard, I totally get it. I just never thought I would see Arlington turn into a city and not a farming community. So that's just my opinion.
Well, since we're telling jokes, I'm telling you, if a rooster's crowing at 5 o'clock in the morning, my wife's going to punch me. So I'm just telling you. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying. But anyway, so let's get with staff and answer any questions, concerns, any ideas for recommendation changes if this passes tonight. So is everyone ready to vote on this as is right now? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Mr. Harmon's no on the first reading. Okay. All right, that item passes. Next up, item D. Or excuse me, C. First reading of ordinance 2018-11 to amend the town of Arlington zoning map by rezoning roughly 1.4 acres of property located at 10972 and 10982 Highway 64 from E Estate to B2 General Commercial. Mrs. Reeder.
Okay, this item in front of you is, as you mentioned, for some property down on Highway 64. Just to orient you a little bit, the property is here with the red around it. This is 64. Chambers Chapel sits right here, so it's in the far southwest corner of town. So I'm looking at chickens again. The area included here is 1.4 acres in size. It consists of 2 parcels. As you mentioned, they're currently zoned E Estate Residential. The proposal from the applicant is to rezone this to B2, which is general commercial. Currently, which you can not exactly tell here with the light, but there is an older single-family home and a accessory building on the back that's somewhat falling down on the property now. The intent and the purpose of this request is to allow for a future small office commercial development on this property. So when you're looking at any zone change, the things we have to take into consideration is what the future land use is, what's nearby, and whether we can accommodate it. So this is the current zoning. So this is the corner of town here, so Chambers Chapel and Highway 64. You see most of the areas down there is E Estate. You do have a few areas of B2 and office. This is Inglewood, just to orient you here, church that's there on the corner. So there are a few small spots with B2. This is the area that is proposed to be changed, so this is what the zoning map would look like if approved. When we look at the future land use map, which calls out everything in town, down here you'll notice in the far southwest corner, we do have the proposal for this intersection to be a community or a commercial intersection. If you look, you see the pink here, and I've sort of blown up this corner here. This pink area is identified as community support commercial. That's about 20 acres in size, and it does include this little area that the arrow is pointing to. That's the part that we're talking about tonight. Around that, in the blue area, is considered an office employment node. That's about 45 acres more. So you'll see along 64 here, anything that's blue, pink, or red is intended for a commercial or an office type use of one sort of or another. So ultimately, the goal is for that whole corridor to turn commercial, with the exception of some areas here between Chambers Chapel and Inglewood. So this piece here would be consistent with that. The community support commercial, or the pink, is intended for community service type commercial development, so daily goods and specialty stores. The B2 is the zoning requested, would allow for those type uses to go in, and it would be consistent with that land use plan. As currently it sits, the E estate, which allows single-family residential only, is actually not consistent. The next thing to look at is what's surrounding the property. As I mentioned, this is at the southwest corner, and this area is less developed than a lot of areas, and it's largely due to a lack of sewer service in this part of town. Nearby uses, if you look around it, include a couple single-family homes, a church. There's the Digger Odell Nursery to the east. Across 64, you have Nature's Earth and Eads Auto Sales, both large lot areas there in Memphis. And I would note that in general, uses along Highway 64 vary pretty widely. I mean, if you go farther west, it is largely a commercial corridor. Once you get into this area around Arlington, it's largely warehouse users and commercial on the south side of this of the road right now. Commercial would be consistent with those uses on the other side and along the corridor primarily. Lastly, utilities and public improvements. Municipal services are available to the site except for sewer, as I mentioned earlier. The home that's there now is served by a septic system. Any business that went in there would also have to receive approval from the county health department for septic. Because of that and the size, it is limited there. They would have to use the septic that's there, so that would limit their development and limit the size of what could be on the lot. There are no other public improvements anticipated, as it is on Highway 64 here. So the town has certain findings that it's required to make when looking at any kind of zoning change. One is that it's in agreement with the general plan, which we've noted that it is. Two, that we're not, the legal purpose for the zoning hasn't been contravened. Three, that there would not be an adverse effect upon adjacent property owners. We didn't anticipate anything from the change just based on the small scale of what could potentially go on the site. There was a question at the Planning Commission from a nearby resident about a driveway location and where things would be. The applicant is not to the point where he has a full layout at this point, but has agreed that that driveway could be shifted if at all possible to reduce the impact on the home directly next door. There is a ditch that runs through here that restricts them somewhat, so he doesn't have full use of that, but he has agreed, and we would look for that to be developed in a way that limited impacts on that. And then lastly, that you wouldn't be benefiting a small group of owners to the detriment of everyone else in the public, and we don't see that as a case. If it's approved tonight, this will come back in front of the board for a second reading. And any development on the site would have to come forward with a site plan and be reviewed by the Planning Commission and the Design Review Committee through the standard channels. Planning Commission did consider this at the public hearing last month and did recommend approval of the proposal. Staff is also supporting it, finding it inconsistent with the future land use plan and the requirements for a zoning map amendment. I'm here, as is the applicant, if you have any questions.
You've heard the recommendation by Mrs. Reader. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion?
Motion by Mrs. Pardue. Second by Mr. Biggs. We have a public hearing on this item also. So we can go ahead and suspend the Board of Mayor and Alderman meeting and open the public hearing. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Brooks, second by Mr. McKee. All right, we are now in the public hearing for the first reading of ordinance 2018-11 to amend the Town of Arlington zoning map from estate to residential. That was published in the Commercial Appeal on August 21st, 2018. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this request, please stand and be recognized. State your name and address for the record. Is anyone here to speak on this particular public hearing on this one? Seeing none, do I have a motion to close the public hearing and resume the Board of Mayor and Alderman meeting?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Brooks, second by Mr. McKee. Questions or discussion for Mrs. Reader or the applicant?
Before we start, I just want to disclose that I've known Mr. Gambrell for several years, and I have no financial stake or anything like that in it, but we've been acquaintances and friends for several years, so I just want that on the record, but there's no gain in my part.
Okay. All right. Any other discussion or questions at this time? Again, this is a first reading, and so, again, we could come back and ask questions for Mrs. Reader and ask questions for staff before the next reading if anyone chooses to. No discussion? All right, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? That item passes. Next up, item D, Resolution 2018-51 to authorize Mike Wisman in his capacity as mayor to enter into an agreement with Powers Hill Design for professional services for Forest Street Park Phase 2 and Depot Square Improvements Construction Phase Inspection Support. Mrs. Durant.
Due to the scale of dirt work and the amount of construction that is due to all be going on in this area at the same time, and due largely in that we only have 2 inspectors, and there's a lot of other construction going on in the city, we would like to contract with Powers Hill Design to allow an inspector, a third party, to come out for 8 hours a week. It's not very much, but to oversee that construction to some degree and answer any questions from an engineering perspective that our inspectors may have during the period of construction. Recommend approval.
Heard the recommendation by Mrs. Durant. I have a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Brooks, second by Mrs. Pardue. Discussion or questions for Mr. Hill or staff?
They're gonna be on call, or is it just gonna be certain hours they're gonna come twice a week, or 3 times? Some of this is gonna get real intense there.
Our intent is to have him there when he's needed, and we try to have a regular schedule, maybe once a week, but if the pace of construction increases, he can be there more than that. We're going to have to balance, what it's costing the town versus his need to be there, but we have the flexibility that he can come for 4 hours and go away and then have to be there all day. You just pay for what you need.
Does that answer your question? Yeah. Any other discussion or questions?
It's just way too big of a project to not put some oversight on it, so.
And even if we weren't losing Mr. Allen, we would still be doing this, correct? Yes. And I meant to say something earlier, Jason. We appreciate all the work you've done. You will be missed, and we appreciate you offering your services to the town and being a part of us as we've grown, so we appreciate that. Any other discussion or questions for staff? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? That item passes. Next up, item E, Resolution 2018-52 of the Town of Arlington Board of Mayor and Aldermen to amend the Arlington Community Schools Budget Board of Education for the 2018-2019 operating budget. Mrs. Owens.
Yes, sir. This is a resolution
You've heard the recommendation by Ms. Owens. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. McKee, second by Mr. Harmon. I do know Ms. Mason did want to come up and just give a couple of tidbits real fast. Did you not? And in general and the budget, if there's any questions, that way you're up here if they have any questions for you. And if you wanted to hit just, I know sometimes at the beginning of school, you want to hit a couple highlights real fast.
I do.
So.
Regarding the budget amendment, every time that we add money to the budget that was previously approved, we come back before this body. The reason why we're here today, you all are aware of Tennessee Code Annotated, which requires certain financial mandates for governmental entities, and this concerns the maintenance of effort. When we look at comparing our 17-18 actual budget to versus our 18-19 budgeted revenue, ACS would need to add an additional $500,000 to our budget to achieve the maintenance of effort, which, as you know, maintenance of effort cannot be reduced. The reason for this is because of the sales tax revenue by Shelby County government. Of course, we do our budget and have it approved before we get our final monies from Shelby County. Last year was a very good year for sales tax revenue for Shelby County, and so that's where the revenue is coming from. And you can see before you where we have highlighted those expenditures, the highlights of that, you'll see it's predominantly going to instructional supplies, $150,000 for instructional supplies, $80,000 to continue upgrading our TV studio equipment to HD. You probably are noticing a lot of our work being done not only in the TV studio, but through the TV studio for YouTube and things of that nature. And you have to have equipment that handles HD platform to do that. Additional software for the classrooms, professional development, safety and security. You'll see under one of the items that there is some additional funds of $107,000 that is set aside from the $500,000. That's a one-time grant. You all may recall that Governor Haslam added to last year's budget and was approved to do one-time security funding for schools across the state. Our allocation here in Arlington was $107,000. Again, that's one-time expenditures. What we are electing to do with that is to try to provide security for our elementary schools. You may have seen out there that, so we are looking at right now hiring one in-house school security that will go between the two elementary schools. We'll also have to obviously purchase all the equipment that goes with that position. This is one-time funding, and so we will have to find the funds out of our general fund budget to continue that. We are looking at reaching out to Shelby County Sheriff's Office in hopes that they will provide us with another security SRO, that we already have 3, and that hopefully we'll be able to provide one of those for each of the schools. As you know, we are in a different situation than most of the other municipalities, as they have their own police force and their cities are giving that extra security to them. We're having to find ways to secure this on our own. So, so that's where that extra $107,000 is coming from. You'll also notice that there's some more money for background checks. There was a new law that went into place July 1 that says that all employees have to have background checks every 5 years. It used to be up until this year, is once you were hired, you got a background check, and it was not required again. This is a good law, but with it comes a dollar value, because obviously we don't want to have to charge our employees every 5 years to have that background check. So with that, those are the highlights of the budget amendment. I'll be happy to answer any specific questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Mason. Any questions from the board on this or any other particular items? Real quick, what were the numbers for school this year?
Yes, on our school enrollment, I just wanted, I did come prepared for that. Today we just did our 16th day enrollment numbers. We've got one more count for our 20th day. This time last year, when we look at just students in K through 12, we had 4,523 students. This year, on the 16th day enrollment, we have 4,627. That's an increase of 104 students from this time last year, and we're at 101.6% of our projection that we made. When we look at our total population, which means our special education students that are more self-contained, and our preschool kids that are special ed preschool kids starting at age 3. We do not receive funding for our preschool classes from the state, but when we add in those to our mix, we educate all of those children. This time last year, the total population, including K-12, special education, and preschool, was 4,590. And for this year, as of today, we're at 4,704, which is a total increase of 114 students from this time last year. So we are quickly making up those students that we lost from Lakeland a couple years ago. With that, I also did want to let the board know, because this is a question I often get because of our partners in Lakeland regarding the high school. How do our numbers at the high school sparse out for between Arlington kids, Lakeland kids, and non-resident kids? We've completed the geocoding as of 8/31, and of the 2,078 students we have at the high school, 1,119 are Arlington residents, which is an increase of almost 100 kids at the high school over the last couple of years, which is 54% of our total population. We have from Lakeland 674 students, which makes up the total population a little over 32%. And then 285 non-residents that go through a rigorous screening process to attend our schools. That's 285, which is a little under 14%.
Wow, so we have 1,119 high school age. I thought we were in the 800 range, yeah, so.
When we started our own school system, we were a little under 900, or right at 901. And over the last couple of years, as we've been developing our programs, we're, as you know, highly sought after for a lot of the programs that we are offering in our partnerships with our universities. And so we're really proud of that. If we look at just Arlington and our non-residents, we're over 1,400 now, and so that bodes well for the security of our school system, depending upon what Lakeland may or may not decide to do. Obviously, our school building was built for 2,300 kids. We would love for Lakeland students to say we think we can offer both groups a quality education and give them more opportunities. But if we have 1,400 kids of both Arlington and our non-residents, I think we can still offer quality education. Maybe not as many opportunities we do now, but we wouldn't have to gut it as much as we once thought.
That's good, and you're still looking at adding programs also?
Oh, yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions? Thank you for those numbers. Any questions for Ms. Mason? All right. Thank you, Ms. Mason.
You're welcome.
Any other discussion on this budget amendment? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That item passes. Item F, Resolution 2018-53, to authorize Mike Wisman in his capacity as mayor to authorize the award bid for the purchase of the fire department exhaust system. Chief Harville. I'm sorry, was Mrs. Owens supposed to do it?
Okay.
Okay. Had you on the list, so I wasn't sure.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We, as you know, we budgeted in our 2018-19 to do an exhaust system, but our grant committee also applied for an Assistance to Firefighters grant, which we have been promised. We're still in the process of accepting that grant. So we developed the specifications for the exhaust system for Fire Station 71, put it out for RFP. That closed on August 31st. We received 3 bid proposals. We reviewed it today and selected the lowest best bid, which is for a MagnaGrip ventilation system with 4 drop downs for the station in the amount of $38,117. That grant, the AFG grant, is a 95% grant, so the town will match it with 5%. It's about a 12-week turnaround from the start date to the finish date, so our anticipation is to have it completed by the end of this calendar year.
You've heard the recommendation by Chief Harville. Do I have a motion to approve? Motion by Mr. Harmon, second by Mr. Brooks. Discussion or questions? I think we've talked about this one before also, so.
Yeah, with the 4 drop downs, that would, so that we can actually get the second piece of equipment in.
Well, it's,
if need
right now,
be.
the way it's configured is we run brush truck and the engine off to the Douglas Street side, and we run our county ambulance and that reserve piece into this area. So for each 4 of those would have their own exhaust system.
Okay, so to accommodate. Okay.
Any other questions or discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That item passes. Thank you, Chief. Item G, Resolution 2018-54 to acknowledge and authorize the purchase of an FT20-2 LP deck over trailer through the National Joint Powers Alliance from Felling Trailers. Mr. Perkins.
This also was a purchase that was approved in the 2018-2019 operating budget. As you said, it's from Felling Trailers. It's a 20-foot deck over trailer. And Felling Trailers was the lowest bid in the amount of $15,468.48. And we recommend approval.
You heard the recommendation of Mr. Perkins. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Brooks. Second by Mr. McKee. Discussion or questions on this? We've really been able to benefit from this joint alliance.
Yes, sir.
So,
Definitely, when you consider the distance this trailer's coming from, you still got a better price for that far away.
anyone else? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That item passes. Are we on item H? Resolution 2018-55 to acknowledge and authorize the purchase of a system for controlled access to the Arlington Community School Safe Room through the National Joint Powers Alliance from Johnson Control Security Solutions. Mr. Perkins.
This request for the purchase of an access control system to be used on the safe room. As you know, we've had some logistical issues with keys and trying to schedule openings and closings and those types of things over there. So in order to facilitate that and be able to utilize it for storm events and be more efficient in how we're able to access that, we're wanting to use an automated access control system. And this platform is something that is expandable, and we could also utilize it with other municipal facilities should we so choose. And as you said, this is also through the joint NJPA, National Joint Powers Association, for the best pricing with Johnson Control Security Solutions.
You've heard the recommendation by Mr. Perkins. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion.
Motion by Ms. Pardue, second by Mr. Harmon. Discussion or questions on this?
Mr. Perkins, in the resolution, it states that you'll have remote access from a desktop. Will that be
Yes,
in
there'll
Public
be
Works?
it's cloud-based. There will be an administrative computer set up, and what we'll have is a system that you can utilize a fob with. Those fobs can be programmed, and it can be remotely killed. I mean, if you lose one or you have a problem, the administrator can get on and kill access to that. As well, administratively, we can have apps on smart devices that we can utilize. If someone, say we have a storm event and there's no one close by, we can have someone who can actually remotely unlock it or lock it.
I was looking at Ms. Mason. I think that's the way the schools kind of have it set up the same way.
Also, you can schedule. I mean, on the administrative computer, you can also schedule locking and unlocking. If you have an event, that you know is going to happen at a certain time, you can set a schedule and it'll automatically unlock.
Any other questions or discussion? Technology is amazing.
Work with their projects
Yes.
every day, so.
Well, I mean, it kind of goes back to probably 6 years ago when we put time locks, just the difference in putting time locks on the restrooms. We were having to pay somebody to go up there and open and close them every night, and we finally put time locks on there. And of course, you're always going to have a couple issues, but it saved a lot of heartache. So we use technology to our advantage when we can. Any other discussion or questions? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? That item passes. Mr. Perkins, hang right there, it looks like. Item I, Resolution 2018-56, to authorize the town of Arlington, Tennessee to enter into an agreement with U.S. Communities, a national government purchasing cooperative for contracting of goods and services. Mr. Perkins.
As we just talked about, the NJPA has been a great source for us for savings, utilizing it to purchase many items and services. Also available to us are the U.S. Communities, which is very similar. It will allow us advantages to purchasing, through cooperative buying power. And we're requesting that we be allowed to enter into an agreement or sign up with U.S. Communities to make purchases that will save us some money, just like NJPA.
You've heard the recommendation by Mr. Perkins. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Brooks, second by Ms. Pardue. Discussion or questions? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That item passes. Next up, item J, Resolution 2018-57 to remove uncollectible taxes from the Town of Arlington certified rolls. Mrs. Owens.
Yes, sir. This is a request from the Shelby County Trustee's Office. As you know, they do bill and collect our taxes, and they work closely with the assessor's office. These businesses have either gone out of business or are no longer able to go back on us because of the statute of limitations. So this is a request to basically write off the taxes. The total amount is $783.70. So the staff recommends approval.
You've heard the recommendation by Mrs. Owens. Do I have a motion to approve? Motion by Mr. Key. Mr. Harmon, second. Discussion or questions? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? That item passes. Next up, item K, Resolution 2018-58 to authorize a purchase and sale agreement for the Town of Arlington 1 acre vacant land to be subdivided from the larger parcel known as A0141 00382 on the southwest corner of Airline Road and Memphis Arlington Road with Wendaletta Property Holdings, LLC. Mr. Lawson.
This is the corner parcel that we've got over here. Remember, we had two letters of intent, one offer and a letter of intent at the last meeting. The board authorized the enter into the contract of sale with Delta with the letter of intent. We've since negotiated a contract in accordance with the general terms of the letter of intent. We've gone back, got the contract in front of you, we've gone back to the attorney, so we've got more specifics. They asked that we bring the contract at this point back to the board for their title underwriters to show that the board did actually approve the contract. It's true, just a formality. You approve the contract, this is just a little definite form. This is for $13 a square foot for approximately 1 acre on the corner. We're going to go back and forth on what the actual dimensions, you won't see that in here, but it may give or take maybe slightly larger, but instead of $13 a square foot.
You've heard the recommendation by Mr. Lawson. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Brooks.
Second.
Second by Mr. McKee. Sorry, we were laughing about my pronunciation of Wendelta as Wendaletta. So that's what happens when you try to read fast. Any discussion or questions on this particular resolution? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? That item passes. Make sure. Item L, Resolution 2018-59 to authorize a purchase and sale agreement for the Town of Arlington, 1 acre of vacant land to be subdivided on the larger parcel known as, I'm not going to read all the numbers on it, west side of Arlington Road, south of Memphis Arlington, adjacent to Arlington Automotive on the west end to West End Development and Investments. This is the property right next door to the one we were just speaking about. Mr. Lawson.
This was the other offer that we had originally.
He's moved over.
Yeah, they ended up coming back with a separate new offer for the property, approximately, there's going to be 1 acre, it's a lump sum price for 1 acre, right off the side, so they ended up coming back and buying. This is an office user property to be, still staff recommends approval. This one is in for $392,000, which $8 square foot. So, this one has been vetted through, I think it'd be a good user for all 4 that we've got. So now we'll just have 2 acres left.
You've heard the recommendation by Mr. Lawson. Do I have a motion to approve? Motion by Ms. Pardue.
Second.
Second by Mr. Brooks. Yeah, so this basically, that vacant land that we've been seeing on both sides of Arlington Automotive, this gives us 3 contracts now, correct? One on the south side of Arlington Automotive right next to it, and these 2 right there, and it still leaves, like you said, 2 acres behind
2 acres behind.
this corner, and we still have a little bit of land down on the far side.
Yeah, 3 or 4 acres.
Yeah. But it should start filling in that area that's been when the old Public Works corner. Any discussion or questions on this particular contract? Seeing none.
Been a good way to do it.
It has been a good way. I think the market, we somehow waited the market out long enough and it worked out well. Any other discussion or questions? All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? That item passes. Item M, Resolution 2018-60 to approve a master development plan for the Myers Park PD, a roughly 38.4 acre plan development to be located at the northeast corner of Memphis Arlington Road and Gerber Road. Mrs. Reeder. Before Mrs. Reeder speaks, I do just want to say, she's probably going to cover it, but I know some of you may be here for this particular project. Some of you know it went to Planning Commission a couple weeks ago. The recommendation that she'll get to in a second was not to move forward with it, but some have questioned why we are hearing it tonight, and it's a developer's right. It's part of the process to come forward even after the Planning Commission, because they're just an advisory board. So I know there's some confusion on that, so I just want to make sure I said that before Ms. Reeder. I know we'll probably clarify that, so thank you. Ms. Reeder.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, so this item that is in front of you tonight is what we refer to as a plan development. It's the Myers Park Plan Development and Master Development Plan. The site is located on the northeast corner of Memphis, Arlington, and Gerber Road. So just to orient you, this is 385 running through town here. Memphis, Arlington, R&L Carriers. The middle school sits right in here past the site, and it's directly across from the Arlington Sports Complex. It's roughly 38.5 acres in size, currently zoned M1 or industrial, and identified as mixed use in our future plan. It's unimproved at the moment, and it's just fields. It's bordered by a mix of uses, including, as I mentioned, R&L Carrier, an industrial user there, which is the trucking company you see here. Arlington Station Subdivision is the large subdivision you see directly across from it here. I-269 or 385 to the east. And then, as I mentioned, Arlington Sports Complex directly across Memphis, Arlington there. This item has been considered a few different times, once in a work session with the Planning Commission and Board much earlier this year. There was a neighborhood meeting, I would note, that was held back in June before the item was submitted. And as the mayor mentioned, it was considered last month by the Planning Commission at a public hearing. Plan development has several things that it calls out for, and I'm just kind of going to go through them and summarize what we have in this one in front of us tonight. The first is the uses that are permitted. This project has 16 different residential areas called out in it, 1 mixed use area, and 10 common open space areas. This is generally the same layout as would have been seen at that work session and then the neighborhood meeting. So I'll start with the residential uses. It's the primary use within the master plan. If you're looking at it here, anything in yellow or shades of yellow is the residential. There are 151 lots proposed, all detached homes on individual lots. That does include both front-loaded and rear-loaded homes, which means your driveway accessing it is either going to come from the front or the back of the lot. Those homes that face on Memphis, Arlington, and Gerber Road, so those here facing the park and these here on Gerber facing Arlington Station will all front the road itself, so that'll be the front of the homes you see, and their access would be from the rear from a garage, and the intent to reduce the number of curb cuts on these 2 roads. The mixed use area is this area up here that you see directly across from the sports complex. It is proposed to offer retail, office, institutional with loft residential. And it's just over 1 acre in size, roughly, I can't remember, I want to say it's about 9,000 square feet of retail space allowed in there. The plan calls for it to be 2 to 3 stories, no more than 3, provide daily neighborhood services for the area, retail and office on the ground floor with the potential for residential space above. Lastly, the open space, which is all of the other areas you see here in the green. Those are your typical neighborhood amenities. So the uses in there would be what you would normally see. detention, landscaping, pools, parks, things of that nature, playground equipment. I've kind of gone over the surrounding uses, but it is something we need to look at. The area is sort of a transitional space between existing industrial and residential. It's serving in that capacity here. As I mentioned, we talked about the surrounding industrial. In this case, it's to the east, and the residential neighborhoods, including a couple neighborhoods, some apartments, and then we have a cemetery here. Your zoning to the north and to the east is light industrial still. To the south, across Memphis Arlington, it's E Estate, but that is the town's sports complex. To the west, you have RS 13, which is our high-density residential with the Arlington Station, as I mentioned, the cemetery and Arlington Manor Apartments. The uses that are proposed in the plan are consistent with most of those immediately surrounding it. However, there is a requirement for a buffer along the north and east boundaries because of the light industrial. The applicant has proposed in the plan a buffer along the rear yard of all the lots on the east property line. In addition to the 3-acre pond in this area here, which is functioning as detention, but can also provide a buffer additionally from any industrial in that area. As I mentioned, homes fronting Memphis Arlington would be consistent with the residential character of other homes along the road there, including Arlington Station, Arlington Trace, farther along, and some of the existing lots there that aren't in one of a identified subdivision. Those along Gerber would face either the side or the front yard of those homes in Arlington Station, so it's still a good connection there between the two. They wouldn't be looking at a backyard fence there. The PD does call out bulk regulations that these lots would be required to follow. There are 4 basic lot configurations that are being proposed, 2 different front-loaded lots sizes and 2 different rear-loaded lot sizes. You can see here the front-loaded is this left-hand column, 50 and 65-foot wide lots. The rear-loaded vary between 45 and 53-foot wide lots. And then they do set minimum front, rear, and side yard setbacks, as well as home size, and that's heated only, does not include any garages, front porches, rear porches, anything like that. This is a unique somewhat for Arlington, given the lot sizes. So staff has found and then put up some additional information here on 2 subdivisions that most closely match for lot sizes and setbacks that we have here in town. So I've just provided for comparison some information on the Preserve, which is an existing established neighborhood here in town, and Hayes Place, which is a new neighborhood that's being built, just for comparison on lot sizes, and then as well on setbacks. You do see, I would note that on Gerber, if you note the front yard setback for those homes facing Gerber is 45 feet, which is quite large and much larger than the others. There is, and I'll talk about it in just a second with the common space, but there is quite a large setback and landscaped buffer along Gerber, similar to some of our other neighborhoods in town, which adds to that setback there to give you the 45. Lastly, there is a table in your plan that talks about the exceptions from the underlying zoning. Staff would just note that any of the requested exceptions are types that are allowed to be requested with the plan development. The PD includes a large section that's devoted to architectural styles of the homes included. These would apply to all buildings that are constructed within this 38 acres. They are required to match one of 4 stated architectural styles, including Craftsman, Colonial, Revival, English, and Farmhouse, and I've sort of thrown some examples up here. The plan has a lot of details in it as to each one of those styles and a home being built that way, as to their roof pitch, porch sizes, window placements, door styles, garage door styles, lots of stipulations on what it's required to meet those guidelines. There are also restrictions with regard to architectural character of all of these homes, stating that they have to be higher quality materials, no vinyl siding would be allowed, no 3-tab roofing tiles, in addition to some other comments. Front porches are highlighted as very important in the community with the smaller lots. As such, there is a requirement that any front porch that's more than a stoop have a minimum 6-foot width and 8-foot depth so that it is truly usable and not just an add-on for looks. And I would also notice there are some examples throughout the plan, and you would have seen it, to show how specific lot types might fit on the various lots that are proposed. So showing how the lot would fit and still could be made to have some outdoor living space available, be it in the center here as almost or near the street, one or the other. The future land use and the zoning of the site. So I mentioned this briefly earlier. Down here you see our future land use plan. The site's the one outlined here in red. It is identified as mixed use. The purple, bright purple, is our industrial area. And then this is the adjacent neighborhoods here. And then our zoning. So this is the same area on the zoning map, as I mentioned, M1, RS13 adjacent to it, and other industrial around. The mixed use from our future land use is intended to have a mix of land uses specifically with pedestrians in mind. They encourage traditional neighborhood developments. And the density that's proposed on this project is 3.9 units per acre. This is consistent with the density in the mixed use portion of our future land use plan, which calls for 4 to 8. The zoning ordinance doesn't identify a specific density for a mixed use PD, but just for comparison, if you had a residential, the RS13, the use next door, would allow 3.35 dwelling units an acre, so it's slightly more than that, and it would fall below the detached single family, what's considered multifamily, which is 4.3. So it falls between those two if we're at truly only residential.
Excuse me, real quick. I know we're done the discussion. Where were you saying next to it where it's 3.3?
So the Arlington Station subdivision.
Okay.
Is that is RS13, which allows 3.35. Open space, there are 10 designated common areas, which total 9 acres, or 23% of the entire site. The town requires 20, so this exceeds that. I would also notice that the town sports complex, which is close to 50 acres, is adjacent across the street as a benefit. We provide that. The common areas include a variety of different uses, and I'll just highlight a couple. The largest is this common area 1 in the back, which, as I mentioned, functions as a detention. There is a fountain proposed in it and a gazebo, so you could sit, but you're not doing a lot else on there other than using it as a buffer, but it is a visual. Common open space 2, this area here, 0.77 acres in size, has a playground proposed, a dog park, some guest parking spaces in there, and then an open lawn area for use from the residents. Number 4 sits right in the middle of the neighborhood. That's over 2 acres in size. It proposes a pool, a pavilion associated with that, some large open lawn areas, additional guest parking on both sides. You see some guest parking here and then a larger guest parking there. Potentially an optional lake there, and then some seating and mostly open lawn. Other common area here on the end, common open space. 10, oops, let me go up to 8 here. 8 is right here in this area. It's just under half an acre in size. That's just got a walking trail, so that's a connection that actually goes all the way out to Gerber here between that block. And then there's a pavilion in there as well, and some additional guest parking spaces there along that area. As I mentioned earlier on Gerber, you had that extra setback. That's because you've got a 30-foot wide green space along the entire length of Gerber. So if you've been down Forest and seen like Kensington or Cambridge with the wide, so it would be similar to that. And a landscape plate is included to show what that streetscape would look like. The applicant also plans to use a white 3-rail fence along both frontages to provide some consistency and identify the neighborhood there. With all of these amenities, the design review committee would be required to look at a common open space plan and provide a final review of those with more details than we have here tonight. At that, I'm going to turn it over to our engineer for a moment and let him cover the next few items.
Go over roadway improvements and circulation. There will be internal road improvements associated with the PD. In addition to that, the applicant will be required to make improvements to Gerber Road and to Memphis Arlington Road. One thing I want to clarify on the staff report, the Gerber Drive right-of-way will be to a full width of 50 feet. We spoke with the applicant prior to the Planning Commission meeting and felt that 50 feet would be adequate to serve the future improvements to Gerber Road. Gerber Road will essentially be a 2-lane roadway complete with curb gutter and sidewalk. One thing I believe Ms. Reeder mentioned, I want to mention again, is the sidewalk along Gerber will be an 8-foot wide sidewalk. That's going to be wide enough to accommodate 2-way pedestrian traffic. The improvements along Memphis Arlington Road. Currently the town is under design with Fisher Arnold with a TDOT grant to extend the bicycle and pedestrian trail. Currently the pedestrian and bicycle lane terminates at Milton Wilson. Town's designing that all the way from the existing termination to Gerber Road. Town is requesting a condition of the PD that the developer reimburse the town for the construction of that portion of the bike lane and TDOT project improvements that would be adjacent to this development. So those costs would basically be a payment in lieu of improvements, and the town would execute the work. The applicant is proposing that the internal road improvements consist of a mountable curb. Staff is not opposed to that. That is something that's been used in other areas of town as well. The applicant is also proposing rear load homes. You can see the alleys here in kind of that purplish color. The alleys will be considered privately owned and maintained by the HOA. Staff has put a condition that all alleys will be required to be installed to public road standards as it relates to compaction and the pavement section. What they'll be is essentially 8 inches of soil cement, 3.5 inches of asphalt total. As is common with most alleys, curb and gutter will not be installed in those alleys, so the water will be directed to the center of the road for stormwater drainage. One thing I want to clarify on condition 7, that condition is saying that the alleys have to be built to the town of Arlington standards, public road standards. And the intent of that was the pavement section to be 8 inches of soil cement and 3.5 inches of asphalt. Drainage and grading, this is the existing site. You can see there's more or less 3 drainage ways that go through this site. The proposed development will be required to install curb inlets and curb underground drainage to convey water. Ms. Angela mentioned there will be a lake on the north end of the property. The applicant is proposing that to be a regional detention facility. Staff is not opposed to that, so long as they limit the peak runoff to accommodate the entire site post-development. One thing that we've mentioned to the developer, not that we know of any concerns, but just something we want to be sure we do our due diligence on, is to verify any downstream drainage restrictions that may be there, whether that be under the CSX Railroad, Highway 70, whatever's downstream. Just want to make sure we're not creating a negative impact by this development. Sanitary sewer, public sewer is available on all sides of this development. Gravity sewer is available. Staff is going to work closely with the applicant to design and install a gravity sewer system that can gravity flow to the existing system that surrounds the property.
Okay, the one thing that is required with any master development plan is that the applicant provide a phasing schedule. There is one in this plan. It shows it constructed in 5 different phases. And I would note that we have worked with them to make sure that each phase maintains the minimum 20% open space, which is something that was a concern, so that it can be considered a standalone project and avoid some of the issues that's happened with previous projects. With any plan development, the town is able to grant those with some deviations from standard code, provided that it meets specific objectives and benefits for the community, residents, and the developer. This is a list of those there, basically having to do with exceptional architecture of the design, preserving character, efficient use of land for utilities, streets, and other infrastructure, alternatives to private automobile travel, small businesses serving the neighborhood that are convenient, providing amenities not found in other neighborhoods, and then providing developer benefits with regard to lowering the cost of infrastructure and increased flexibility. Looking throughout it, staff did find that the development plan document itself is very thorough for this, which is an infill site. It does promote a more efficient use of the street and pedestrians throughout, through the sidewalks and the connectivity throughout. We believe it does provide adequate details and the requirements that would guide development in any future phase here. It does provide passive and active open spaces opportunities for residents, which we do not see in a standard subdivision necessarily. This is a departure from our typical subdivisions, but the site is somewhat restricted based on adjacent uses. We would anticipate that you would result in quality homes through the development that could serve different portions of the community. If it was approved, and this item would have to come back in front of the board for preliminary and final plats, construction documents, and as I mentioned, design review, planning commission review. There are still several steps yet to happen. As the mayor mentioned, the planning commission did consider this at their meeting on August 20th. They did not vote to recommend approval on the item. However, as mentioned, the proposal is consistent with the future land use plan and the conditions. So staff's here to answer any questions, as is the applicant, who I believe also has a few items to show.
Yeah, so after staff's report, we need a motion and a second to get this on for discussion.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Brooks.
Second.
Second by Mr. Biggs. Now, usually we go straight into the public hearing, but I did have a request from Mr. Grant if he could say a few words before or do his little presentation before that to maybe answer some other questions and then go into the public hearing and then come back and answer. So, Mr. Grant?
Keith Grant, 177 Crescent Drive in Cairo, Tennessee. I've been asked, as you heard earlier, I got a negative vote from the Planning Commission. Why would you do this, or why are you moving forward with it? I'm not necessarily moving forward, but I would just like to ask the opinion. I mean, in essence, ask consideration at the board level. We've met with homeowners that live in the adjacent neighborhood at a neighborhood meeting in June, and everyone walked out of there happy with our plans. So I don't know if I had promoted that well to the, can't speak on behalf of everyone, but I can speak on behalf of the people that were there. And they liked the fact that it would help buffer and protect them from future industrial areas possibly developing into that area. So that's part of it. The other part of the reason is that, quite honestly, I just feel like it's a good plan. Yes, I am a for-profit business, and yes, I do this for a living. But at the same token, I believe in this project a lot. We put a lot of time in it. I've seen this in other applications around the country with this density in exactly the same situation, an industrial application, which they came in to either redevelop or develop for the first time, this type of application. So this is a $51 million project when all the homes are built out. It would generate $152,000 of sales of property taxes annually to the city. It would bring in approximately $3 million to the school system every year on an ongoing basis. One thing about it, the kids going to the middle school you wouldn't even have to provide busing to them because they're so close in proximity to the middle school. So just a few things about it. So this is a traditional neighborhood type design where we look for walkability within the community. This follows also your land use plan. When you look at the land use plan and look at mixed use, there's a page on it. We submitted this after reading in the zoning ordinances, which address mixed use, but also where it goes into greater detail, the land use plan. As a developer, we generally start with those two documents before we make an application, before we even contract property. We do that before we put money into it. As far as we can tell, we've adhered to everything within the land use plan and everything within the zoning ordinance. And even when you read the land use plan, it addresses things such as walkability. And is the community walkable? Well, yes, it's walkable because of the tighter radiuses we put there. We have sidewalks, we have walking trails that connect through the lots to connect the subdivision to the open spaces. And we even put a greenway that connects out on, that we call like a greenway out on Gerber Road. Connectivity, as I mentioned, you have the walkable connectivity, the mixed housing. We have 4 different housing types within here. Mixed use and diversity, so we have the commercial with the lofts above, which also has the opportunity for institutional or office use. The quality of architecture also is important. We've spent a lot of time, as you've noticed, going through the book, and I'll flip through some screens pretty quickly in a minute to show you some of the architecture, but as Angela's already hit on a lot of that, so I won't rehash it. Traditional neighborhood structure, I've addressed some of the characteristics. It's generally smaller lots, but open spaces. It's setting the homes closer to the street with front porches. Every house will require a front porch. Just to clarify, it's actually 8 wide by 6 deep is the minimum. Quite honestly, most of them will be larger than that, similar to what you've seen in White Oak so far up in White Oak 1B section over along Milton Wilson Boulevard. But we've also incorporated a lot of amenities into these open spaces. And then the increased density is a function of this type of design, as is smart transportation, which means that you can walk to a lot of the amenities within the community without having to get in your car and drive to them. Sustainability, well, one of the things about the sustainability of this is by denser development, you have less costs for the city long-term, less infrastructure costs, you're repaving less streets, less sewer to maintain, and less drainage to maintain in the long term. And hopefully at the end of the day, which is our goal, is to have a better quality of life. You know your neighbors. They're generally more secure neighborhoods because people hang out on the front porches and can know their neighbors a lot better. And so you kind of tend to watch out for one another. I did a small lot community in Lakeland many years ago. It was but it's turned out they set up neighborhood watches and were very active in watching one another's homes when others were out of town. This kind of will paint a picture. Just that my favorite one is actually the center picture here, because this is really what one with the red facade to it. That's what I see as the streetscape of this one day looking like. But all of these give you an idea of the traditional neighborhood design. Again, I think we know where the area is now that Angela's been through it. And I'll just go on to comment on a few of these items. And before I get into this, I'll just sit here for a second and talk to you. We did a work session with you all several months ago along with the Planning Commission. I want to just tell you some changes that we made relative to that. I heard things such as, I'd like to see the density go down. We did decrease it by 12 units from what our original plan was, so 12 less homes. We added larger lots and created multiple minimum square footages based on lot size, so we don't just have one minimum square footage for everything. We've got a variety of house plans offered in there. We also heard parking concerns, and I'll show you in a few minutes where we've done this. We've added up to 150 parking spaces overall throughout the community because of the alleys. Increased open space to more than 9 acres, added amenities to the open space to show exactly what's offered. We removed the townhomes because we heard that no one wanted townhomes in the commercial area. I wouldn't say no one, several people did not. And we also analyzed the cost of the alleys because I had heard some concerns about alleys. There was a bad one community in Arlington was just a bad experience for the town where the surface was never put down. Quite honestly, I'm not sure they were installed properly to begin with. They sure weren't installed to the standards that we're going to be installing them to. But I want to share with you the cost. The cost on those to resurface the ones in this proposed development, $70,000. You do that once every 15 years. That's $35 per household per year. That's nothing to us. We charge $500 in dues. Charging someone $500 or $550 isn't going to keep someone from buying the home. One person has also mentioned to me, well, would you charge more for the dues of people who live on alleys versus those who live off the alleys? And that's something that we're open to doing. It just means charging an extra $60 or $70 a month to those people to cover the cost of the alleyways. And that's not part of our proposal, but if that's something that the board felt inclined for us to do, we'd be we would consider.
Did you say $60 or $70 a month, or did you mean per
I'm
year?
sorry,
I
year.
thought you said year earlier. That's what I was
It's
correct.
per year,
Okay.
yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, 60 to 70 a month they would.
Okay.
Okay, the comments, so economic impact I've addressed with you, architecture I have, common areas we've talked about, parking we talked about, traffic calming measures, some things that I've put into the community is traffic calming measures, and I'll show you in a second, but some traffic circles at the intersections. And one thing I'd like to add that came out of my conversation with the Arlington Station neighbors and Arlington Downs is they were concerned about traffic up and down Arlington, up and down Gerber. This is not part of the application, but it's something that I've told some of the neighbors we'd be willing to do is put a traffic circle at the intersection of Cashmere and Gerber whenever we install this. It's something I would want to obviously work with the city, the town's engineering staff to do that. But it's something that is not included in this, but we would be interested in doing, and they felt they were happy to hear that whenever we spoke about it. So that's one item. The other thing I want to talk about as far as traffic, the neighbors also brought up issues of problems of traffic cutting through Arlington Downs to Highway 70 ever since Gerber was cut off when the interchange went in. And not everyone, I didn't know this at the time, but since then I found that the town is working to put a stoplight in at Jetway, which they were complaining a lot about the industrial employees coming through their neighborhood to go up there. That light at Jetway should fix that. As we all know, there's a lot of accidents over there. That should help that, as will the improvements. The other concern was school traffic. And we believe that in most cases, if I lived here, I would have my kids walking because I wouldn't want to fight the school traffic. So we don't believe that you'll have a big change to the school traffic going over to the middle school. But what we can say is that the road improvements should significantly change that, because by us widening Memphis Arlington, you'll now have a place for people to park. I didn't think about this when I met with the homeowners, but apparently, as narrow as Memphis Arlington is right now, you probably have one-way traffic during school hours, at least when they're coming and going. Our widening of Memphis Arlington will help relieve some of that. Okay, so talked about alleys and density. These are streetscapes that we've created through our architect, just to give you a general idea of the different architecture that we would be offering. Some of the things as you get into the architecture that we've addressed throughout the book is proportioning and massing the houses. We worked with our architect, which he was at the Planning Commission, but couldn't be here tonight. It's Brad Shapiro, which is of Shapiro and Company. Brad did a lot of the designs down in the Harbortown area. He's done a lot of this traditional neighborhood design where you have the large front porches, not just in Memphis, but within the state of Tennessee and even out of state. And I asked him to come up with some designs that would make the town comfortable that everything would be adhered to whenever we build and develop this. So we have the proportioning and matching, which is taken into consideration within the booklet, the veneers that would be used, the front porches, window sizes, even the grid patterns on the windows, column sizes, shutters, and front doors, and the materials that they're made of. This gives you an idea of what a craftsman home would look like. These are some of the things that are actually spelled out within. I won't read through each of these, but just give you an idea of the level of detail we've gone to. Colonial Revival. Now, ours would have front porches. These right here, one of them does, but this just gives you an idea of the architectural thing. Again, more details on it. The English, more details on it. The farmhouse, along with details which make up the farmhouse design. I had these floor plans put up here so everyone could see an idea of what we're looking at on just the alley load product, because I've been asked, where do people spend their time outdoors? Well, we're actually going to have, in here, and I think, okay, you will see that we have outdoor living space on each of these lots, either be it in this area, back towards the alley, or on the side of the home, as we have also right here within the home. Generally, you have living rooms or kitchens facing in. As you can see here, the same thing occurs. So even though they're smaller lots, we're wanting outdoor living space. You'll still have the front porches on each of these. These are not plans that I plan to use. I mean, they're two down, but they're not. We're going to do our own designs. We'll have porches even larger than this across the front, more along the lines of this here, or even larger. This gives you just an idea of how they fit on the lot and how they will look. And you'll find here's a front-loaded plan. They actually have rear yards. Again, you have an area here where you have the alley loaded, and you can see the living spaces right here. Okay, so the parking, one of the requirements that we're doing, let's disregard this because I have not counted that in the numbers that I gave you all earlier. Let's just look at this parking here. We're requiring that within the alleys, each home must have a parking spot. So disregard this. So right there you have 75 lot owners here. and you will have 75 spaces just with this parking required alone with each house being built. Okay, I'm going to come back to parking in a minute, but I want to go through the common areas because I was asked what all is going to be included. Well, we're going to include a pool. We're going to include a pavilion. Walking trails throughout here. I've added pull-in parking in the open spaces. We had it here by the pool already, but you also have just a nice area as people come in. You'll see a couple park benches and landscaping behind it. This is another open space that we have. Okay, and here we have a playground in this area as a dog park back here also. And just green space, as in the previous one, open lawn for the kids to play in. This is the very back area where we have the lake, just a nice area to walk to and oversee the fountain in the back. This is the front, which will have a white picket fence running right around, a white split rail fence, I should say, wrapping around it. You have the walking trail that's already in right now, but we will also have sidewalks connecting all of this. This is a large open lawn, again, an area for kids to play and people to hang out in, but also it's kind of a nice buffer as you drive into the community, as you drive up to it to see it. This is, again, it's just showing every little open space that we have. This is along our green belt, which I'll show in a second, our green line that's kind of along Gerber Road, but a seating area here and a stop seating area here before you enter the neighborhood. This is a walking trail that goes between the homes. It connects back to the pool area, which is up here with a pavilion and walkway in the middle. This is the green line, which runs all up and down Gerber. The sidewalk will be set back closer to the homes, where when you walk off your front porch, you're only 5 or 6 feet from the sidewalk, so it'll be mostly landscaping from there. This just highlights all the green spaces. This gives you an idea of the different street sections. We're also using narrower streets, but whenever we do use narrow streets, we have what's called parking bays in this area. So this area right here is one-way traffic, and I'll show you where it's located in a minute. This is your typical 31-foot street section from back of curb to back of curb, which is mostly around the front-loaded homes. This over here has the parking bay, so you'll see a little offset right here where we park cars, and there's going to be 2 of those at a time. I didn't want any more than 2 cars parked together. It would just take away from the streetscape, but I'll show you where that is on the site map in a second. This is the traffic circle, and the way that we have the sidewalks oriented to put you not out in the middle of an intersection, but actually facing the other walkover in this direction. Okay, this will give you an idea of the different street sections. So this is a 31-foot right-of-way where the front-loaded homes are. Each of these dark areas is the parking bays. You also have pull-in parking here, parking bays all across here, parking bays here, and over here. You also have parking within the alleys to build in. So this is 7 or 8 spaces here. You've got more parking in the alleys here and also over here. Now, this is something I haven't even brought up until now, but another option that I actually have for this road is to take it to if the board deems it was necessary. We can do a similar thing here with parking bays, just like we did here in front of these homes, which are front-loaded. We had just gone with this alternative area, the 31-foot right-of-way earlier. It would require, I believe it's a 34-foot right-of-way, which does this type of parking. So that's something that we would be open to doing if you all felt we needed extra parking here. One thing we've done with the front-loaded garages, we make sure they're set back at least 20 feet from the street, at least 7 feet from the facade of the home. The porch sticks out another 8, so they're actually 16 feet from the end of the porch. But the garages, the idea is the cars can't park in the driveway. You have to get the garages back far enough where you can't park in the driveway. Okay, this just gives you an idea of the landscape buffers and the tree plantings, landscape plates through here, and this just tells you where the different plates are located. We were asked also to look at it from the fire department's perspective. We verified that all of the fire engines would work within the alleys. Not the specific one that we were requested to test in the alleys, we did, and it worked, as it works through the street also with the tighter turning radiuses. This is just the way we're making the alleys to meet the city standards. Our final site plan, each color represents a different housing product, and here's your commercial product over here that we were talking about. Finally, welcome home. So hopefully we are able to welcome someone home to this one day. There was, as it was pointed out, this is Cashmere right here. I just wanted, if you all asked me to do that, this is Cashmere Drive. This is where we could put a traffic circle in if we were to move forward with this project. But I had some neighbors request that, and I just wanted to put that out that we had discussed that with them. This is just an overall vicinity map of the whole area. The traffic light would be going here at Jetway. That traffic circle would be right over here. And I just thought you may need that for presentation. Thank you, and I'll be happy to answer questions later as y'all discuss it.
Thank you, Mr. Grant. So now we will have the public hearing on this particular item. So if I have a motion to suspend the Board of Mayor and Alderman meeting.
Motion to suspend.
Motion by Mr. Brooks, second by Mr. McKee. So we are now in the public hearing for Resolution 2018-60 to approve a master development plan for the Myers Park PD, a roughly 38.4 acre planned development to be located on the northeast corner of Memphis Arlington and Gerber Road. Notice this hearing was published in the Commercial Appeal in August 2018. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this request, please stand and be recognized. State your name and address for the record. So just by show of hands, about how many people do we have here to speak on this? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. I'll start over here and work my way across, if you don't mind. You want to go first? Yes, sir. Yeah, you want to go first? Sure. Everybody will come state your name and address for the record. We'll give you up to 3 minutes.
Robert Elliott, 11252 Ivy Drive. This is the third time I've seen this presentation, and it's nice. But what I've never heard is any negative about this property. Everything is positive out here, so it should be hard for you all to vote for it because there's nothing negative about this project. Absolutely nothing. One thing he said, get to know your neighbors. And that is true because you can reach out and touch them. That's how close it is. Emergency vehicles. I work in an area kind of policing. It will be hard to enforce that when the cars bag over this. You put the car in your driveway, you'll get a lot of calls, and you block it the sidewalk, then you want the sheriff's office to tell the people to move their car. That's just not gonna work. That's just bad juju all day. And let's get with Gulfstream, RL Trucking and Mains. You already have a problem there because you got 79 signs that say no parking, and they still park there. So you can put 5 red lights up there all you want. You still have the parking on Gulfstream. I know, I did it for years on my own. What this project looked to me like a dressed up set of apartments. It looks like no community, no homes. It looked like a nice condominium, something you want on Mud Island to say you live downtown. We're in Arlington, we want family homes, family this. This just didn't display this to me at all. Beautiful, looks good, too condensed. Let's get with coming out of the neighborhood. When the middle school, he said you can go around and put a turnaround on Cashmere. I live there. Trucks already come down there, not often, but they do come. And I can assure you that people are gonna park in front of their home. You can put no parking signs all day. Remember, you have 2 patrol officers that's patrolling that area. So they don't have time to write tickets all day. And then you can't tow the car, so you just write them. So people gonna park there. Now you can't get by. It's just too many people for that area over there. Put a gas station up.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. Anyone else on this side of the room? I'll move over to here. Who had hands up over here? Yes, sir. You want to come forward? Name and address for the record, please.
Mark Cardona, 5611 Gerber Road. I've been there for 31 years. This is an answer to my prayer. I look out my yard every morning, there's nothing there right now. R&L moved in how many years ago? That's okay, because it's way down on this side. But since I've been out there, there was nothing there, period. So this, to me, is an answer. What's not to like about this? I understand there's some density issues, but at the same time, widen Gerber, do traffic control. Memphis Arlington is a mess down there during the school. Widen that. That shouldn't have been done already, in my opinion, because they're parking in front of my house all the way up in the middle of Gerber Road, just waiting on their kids to get out of school. That, to me, would all go away for the most part. So I'm all for it. I would much rather look out my front door every morning when I get up and open the blinds and see this than any other alternative that I can imagine, industrial or otherwise.
Thank you, Mr. Cardona. Next hand. Anyone? Yes, sir.
Chris Gotze, 11216 Cashmere Woods. I'm all for homes going in that area. Don't have a problem with that. Much rather have homes there than industrial. Don't want more trucks. Already having a deal, like the gentleman said, with the trucks coming down on Gerber every now and then. My biggest concern is traffic. I live on Cashmere Woods. There's approximately 20 homes just on that section. We have over 50 school-age children that play outside every single day. And we deal with the traffic constantly. Teenagers driving through 50 miles an hour. Making that corner from Gerber, because Gerber's, there's not much there. So my biggest concern is the traffic. If we can alleviate the traffic, I like the idea of the traffic circle. I don't know what the neighbors are gonna think about it, but if it slows traffic down, I'm totally for it.
Thank you, Mr. Gotze. I saw another hand or two. Yes, sir, in the back of the room.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Philip Hendren, 11236 Cashmere Woods. I'm a little behind the power curve. We've been getting the notifications about this establishment for a while for this development. Again, like Chris said, we live just a couple houses apart. I've got 2 young kids. They play in the street. That came out wrong. They play in the neighborhood. Rewind. They do play in the street. We're working on it. It is what it is. We'll get back to that. A couple concerns. Again, like they were saying earlier, those houses are very close to each other. 5 foot's not a lot of room. You can't reach out and touch your neighbor. Fire's obviously a concern when you've got one structure that close to another structure. Y'all have worked that out. I wouldn't live 5 feet from my neighbor. I grew up in the country. Can't wait to move back there, but don't have enough money to right now. Moving along though, traffic is a big concern. Maybe the traffic circle will slow them down. Maybe it won't. That does put them at a straight shot to head towards the Sitco if they go down Gerber without the traffic circle there. When you get more people though, you do get more tax dollars and things like that. But those folks that are walking to the middle school, a couple years are going to be driving to the high school. Where are they going to park their cars? Just don't think there's enough parking. And also with more people, you get more trash. We've had a couple summers here in Arlington. I know there was an issue a couple years ago. The trash folks weren't closing the lids on the containers. We got flies really bad, and we're a lot more spread out than these individuals are going to be, especially in those alleyways and those confined spaces. So these are all things to consider as you make a decision.
Thank you. I saw another hand or two. Mr. Volker.
Jim Volker, 6236 Queens College Drive. My issues with this are pretty much well documented. I talked to everybody knows them. For the most part, what I have a problem with is this is compared to the preserve. It's nothing like the preserve. Preserve's 43 lots. Average home size is 2,803 square feet. 48 lots on in the preserve. 32 lots in Hayes Place. 2.46 lots per acre. Hayes Place is 13 acres. Those neighborhoods work because they're small, pocketed, one way in, one way out neighborhoods. Hayes Place, price point's $359,000 to $451,000. These houses won't be anywhere close to that. Like I said, they're pocketed neighborhoods. That's the reason they work. Small number of lots. It's 151 lots, way too dense, too many cars. You're probably talking 300, maybe 400 cars in a small area. I like the architecture, I like the design, I like the craftsman style house. If this was 75 lots without the rear load garages, it'd be great.
Thank you, Mr. Volker. Do I have any more hands, any more speakers? I didn't see anybody. Yes, ma'am.
I have a hurt knee, so I'm hobbling. Jelena Bowling, 6100 Chester Street. I just want to add that the pull-offs on the more narrow streets sound wonderful, But my daughter lives in Villages of Arlington, and that's what they have. It doesn't work. Go over there on a Saturday afternoon, you can barely get your car between two cars that are parked in the street, and they're all doing it because those little pull-throughs get taken up real quick. And it's a real problem, especially with children playing. And you've got a neighborhood this dense, you're gonna have a whole load full of children in there. It's just asking for a problem.
Thank you, Ms. Bowling. Anyone else here to speak? Going once, going twice. All right, do I have a motion to close the public hearing and resume the Board of Mayor and Alderman meeting?
Motion to close.
Motion by Mr. Brooks, second by Mr. McKee. We are back on the main motion. So this is discussion or questions for staff, for the applicant, or just discussion amongst the board. Again, I guess I'll start it out. It's been stated, again, that we're here because the applicant asked to present it before the board, even though the Planning Commission did not approve it. I have not spoke with the Planning Commission members. I just spoke with staff since that meeting. And I know there was a lot of discussion, went pretty late. Besides that, the details, I know I know I've been asked by some in this audience, what's my thoughts on this? I like the plan. The density is the issue. I do like, and I've asked the applicant about density myself. I've asked, but a lot of the concerns that we've started back with the work session, and from what I hear at the Planning Commission, with the rear loading garage, the alleyways, we have a bad taste in our mouth as a board on that because of when the market crashed and what happened in White Oak, not being up to standards. I don't foresee us as a board and our engineering allowing that to happen again. But that was just a bad time for the town. But so some of these things that I've had concerns about have been addressed. Again, density is the key. I had some notes back here. But I just kind of wanted to at least get the discussion going, because we do get calls, and I know Ms. Mason gets it. We get calls on the traffic over there for Memphis Arlington. We get calls on traffic for Gerber. Price points, or square footage, I'm not getting into that. I did see some numbers that did kind of surprise me that Ms. Reeder put up when I looked at Hayes Place and the Preserve, some of the things Mr. Volker brought up, but I was surprised at the minimum square footage on some of those, which surprised me. I think one was 2,000 for Preserve, which there's not one in there that's 2,000, but that's the minimum. And then Hayes Place, I think, was 2,400. And I wasn't sure on the total acreage of like Hayes Place compared to this is 38 acres. I wasn't sure on what the Preserve is. That's 15 acres, 18 acres, I don't know. But I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but that's just one of the things, when you put those numbers up, I've looked at some of the board members and I was kind of surprised by some of those myself. But anyway, I'm just trying to get the conversation going. So if anybody has a question for staff, for Mr. Grant, if Mr. Grant wants to come back up and address anything that he heard during the public hearing, you're more than welcome to come back up. But I'm open the floor for discussion. Seeing none?
Whoop, no.
Oh, okay, that's what I'm not, so I'm.
I was gonna get somebody else to take it before I got started.
That's why I felt like I had to say something, because everybody was quiet, so I
Okay.
had to get it going.
Okay, I was part of the planning commission, so I'll just continue on. It's a very pretty project. It's how it functions. This is the issue. You can have X number of houses stacked on top of each other and fall within a certain guideline, but how does it function? The fire truck would go down this 20-foot narrow alleyway, but when somebody has their car parked on either side of the alleyway, which they will, because there's not enough parking, then the fire truck can't get down there. I speak of this, of course, I'm a fire chief. Parking in front of the house, the little inlets, that makes it almost impossible if the house is on fire for us to pull up in front of the house, because we have cars parked in the front in these inlets. It doesn't function well. So a lot of times your density has a direct impact on how your neighborhood functions. So that hits safety. When you have houses that are 5 foot off the property line, and they have this down on Mud Island. But I guarantee you, if they get one on fire, they're gonna lose about 4 or 5 before they get it stopped. You know, I've seen that myself, you know. So, function, you know, you add about, I saw parking for a few cars. With the 10 foot from the back of the house, 2 of the parking places, they can't park in the driveway. They can't wash their own vehicle there at the house because the car is going to be hanging in the alleyway. It's function. When you add, and I know, you know, you can put this circle driveway thing in out there in the middle of the street, but when you add another 3, 4, and if they end up with 4 cars per household, you could have 500 or 600 additional cars through here. The circle driveway, is it going to slow the traffic down? Well, it's probably going to slow it down because you got 400 additional cars bumper to bumper trying to get through. So yeah, it'd probably slow it down. It's a very pretty project. If it was in an area that wasn't right next to the middle school, you're going to put a lot more cars mixed in with trucks. That's not a good combination. Just the overall safety part of it it's, in my opinion, it doesn't function well. And this is an industrial zoning. And they're asking for a PD. We don't have to do this. You know, the future land use map, yes, it shows that in the future maybe, but the future land use map, I've said this years ago, is really a wish list of what we might want it to be. It is the official zoning ordinance, which is the law. So my opinion is the functionality is just not going to add to a good quality of life right there.
Next person. Mr. Pardue, I see you
Yeah,
chomping at the bits.
I'm ready. You know, I've talked to Mr. Grant about the concerns that I've had, and they've been expressed since we had the workshop. And I see that you've made efforts to try to address some of those. I'm not quite there. I agree with Ms. Bowling. You know, I actually drove through that neighborhood, not even during the weekend, to see how those parking pockets work. And even during the week when people have the streets all to themselves and they can park in those parking pockets, they're still parking right in front of their own home. So they're not going to go down the street and park in a parking pocket. They're not even going to go across the street and park in the parking pocket because that's in front of somebody else's house. So I don't quite see those operating like they would on paper. I do have major concerns with the lack of parking within the homes, front load, rear load. You know, I'd like to see that all the driveways are 18 foot wide so I can fit 2 cars side by side and 20 foot deep, however that looks. We've talked about it. You know, I know you envision this being targeting couples with young families or no families, and then maybe envisioning them upgrading or into other homes. But you know, how many of those are going to be able to afford to move into bigger homes or into other neighborhoods? I personally did. We've upsized, we've downsized, all within Arlington, and so I know that happens. But how often is that going to happen in this neighborhood of this size? So I do have concerns there. I do have issues with the 45-foot wide lots. I would like to see that the lots be no smaller than 50 foot wide. I know a good majority of them are, but I'd like to make sure that those that are at 45 are increased to 50 foot wide, because I think that will help with some of the spacing that we have issues with. And then we talked about the common open space. I think that what you have helps address some of that, but I do have concerns with those homes along Gerber. I've talked with Angela, and I see that Memphis Arlington, some of those folks could actually utilize the park across the street. So that's an option for them, but for those along Gerber, there really aren't a lot of functional, talk about functional options for those kids to play when they don't have, much yardage. So I do have concerns with that. I do wish that 3-acre open space was more internal. I get it that it's being used as a buffer with the industrial in the back, but I would like to see it more functional, unless it just has to be there for drainage purposes. I echo a lot of what Mr. Harmon has said. I do have concerns, not terrible, but with the mixed use. I know with the future land use and what you're referencing, the minimum requirements, that mixed use really is less than what a minimum requirement would be for that. And so that would be my issue as well. Is Arlington ready for this use in this spot? And I'm not sure if we are.
Next. Everybody wants to wait, but somebody's got to go.
I'll go.
Well,
again.
Let's give some.
I'll go, I guess, because I wanted other people to go so they knock some stuff off my list,
Knock mine off.
which they did. So I appreciate that, because I echo a lot of the same concerns they have. The one thing I'll say too about the parking pockets that I don't particularly like, I think they're dangerous, because when I drive down those neighborhoods, you can't see what's on the other side of that car, and the car is right there beside the road. And so I'm a little bit nervous driving in those neighborhoods. If there's a kid going to run out, what's on the other side of that car? So that, just in general, just so you know, I don't particularly care for those. I do have concerns, again, like they mentioned, with the overall amount of parking. Cheryl mentioned the 45-foot. When I went to the Preserve and I saw, and I love the Preserve. I think the Preserve and Hayes Place are both great neighborhoods. I wish we had more those smaller neighborhoods like that. But when I pictured a lot width that's 5 feet narrower than what's in the Preserve, that was just hard for me to kind of grasp. That would be, to me, a really narrow lot. And then with the green space, the biggest green space is the pond, which is in the very back of the neighborhood. And it kind of reminds me of Kensington, where, we have green space that's across the street. Well, how much, does that really function for the neighborhood? It may look nice from Gerber or whatever, but are the kids in the neighborhood or the people in the neighborhood actually going to be able to use that green space, or are we just considering it green space? So I have concerns with the green space. With the green space that's on Gerber, if I'm driving down Gerber, that's not going to look like green space to me. It's going to look like their front yard. So to me, to claim that as neighborhood green space, I have a little bit of a hard time with that as well. I think that's enough for now.
Mr. McKee?
Go ahead.
Well, as several have said, I think it's a beautiful plan. I think overall there's a lot of positives with it. I think there's a lot of positives with, I'm one that I don't have a lot of heartburn on the alleyways if they're done properly. I think not everybody's going to want them, but I think some people will. I do get a little bit of concern, similar to Jeremy, on the green space discussion. We've had this conversation, no telling how many times with these neighborhoods, because we have low-lying areas in Arlington, and they've got to build up the property to be able to make them functional and not in floodplain in some areas. And this is something I think our board needs to seriously consider discussing at a further time. But is an open pond that, honestly, I don't know that all the way around that pond is going to stay groomed and mowed and all that. Most likely it's going to grow up around it and create that buffer, but it's not really a green space for the neighborhood. I mean, you could essentially have the walkway and the gazebo and some of the grass around there mowed to be able to look out over the pond, but the rest of it's really not usable space. And, you know, I'd rather see some of that move back into the interior area. And I think we got to go back as a board and ask ourselves, do we want to see a development here, or do we want to see it sit as industrial? And I think that we do owe Mr. Grant that information so he's put a lot of time and money into this, and I know that doesn't weigh anything, but it's his business. But we need to decide, do we want to allow a development here? Do we want to keep it industrial? If we want to keep it industrial until a further time, I mean, that's fine. Or do we want to sit here and make amendments to what this proposal is enough that's satisfactory to us? And so, I mean, that's up to this board, but if you think that you want to approve it with amendments, then make some proposals on it so we can move forward. But if not, we need to be able to let Mr. Grant know that, you know, we're satisfied with leaving it as industrial.
Mr. Brooks?
Overall, the plan is great. I like Craftsman style homes. To me, it's the best look around. If you drive down Sam Cooper, hanging left towards the fire station, the new homes they built, all Craftsman, look great. I like the architecture. I like the front porch. I like the distance from the road. I have a hang up also with the 45-foot lots. I think 50 would be my minimum. I'm not crazy about alleyways. I don't want to see what happened to White Oaks happen again. I know we can all sit here and say it's not going to happen, but it could. Now, I'll throw out something kind of crazy that would address something Larry said about the distance between the homes. And on your last slide, one of your last statements was quality of life, correct? So what's it cost to sprinkle a home this size? You're going to pass it on to the homeowner. What's it cost to sprinkle a home this size?
An age-old question that I've dealt with in my industry. They generally, on something like this, can run almost, because nobody's really doing this regularly on a lot of houses, as much as $2 a square foot. So a homeowner would pay $6,000 to $7,000. The problem that we run into is that we've seen. I mean, I've dealt with sprinklers. I've put them into apartments before, and the problem is that people say that you get a discount in your insurance and stuff. You don't, because people flood their houses afterwards. They get mad at them because they later on do something that causes them to go off. They're just problematic. But the distance we're doing, the minimum standard for fire is 3.5 feet off the property line. We're at 5 feet off each side, which is 10 feet between the houses. That is typical. Just about every neighborhood I've built in, actually I think it is every neighborhood I've built in Arlington has 10-foot side yards between the houses. That's minimum.
Well, I
So
agree,
this is-
that's plenty, but
so
I'm
this is
on the
pretty
same
standard.
boat with Larry. When that alleyway is full of homeowners, you're not getting a fire truck down.
Well, they
there.
can, no, but they can still fight the fire from the front, just like they do with the other houses.
There's y'all an option. You
Okay,
can think
now,
about
let
it.
me, I can give you a lesson on firefighting.
Okay. Let's try to keep it, try to keep it down.
I understand.
Okay. With that, if the fire is in the front part of the house, depending on where the occupants might be, we have to attack the fire from the other side. And it's the only way that we can make a rescue. If the fire's in the front and the only way that we can come in because of distance, vehicles or what have you, if we go in the front, we will push that fire on top of the people, and you're guaranteed not to have any survivability rate. You know, it can be debated, but after 39 years, I've about got it figured out.
Well, Mr. Harmon, I hate to argue with a 39-year fire chief, but that's the way we have to fight fires now. We pull up on the street and we fight it from the front or pull it to the back. And we pull the hose where we need it. I mean, I'm not trying to defend this, but I'm saying whether it's alleyways or not, we pull up at the best available spot, and we pull the hose where we need it. And we're not, and so
And the
if
back
a house
is-
doesn't have an alleyway, we still fight it from the back if we have to.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't want to get with my experience versus yours, because you can put me down on that, but I'm just saying
this
we
could
have
be
to.
interesting.
Yeah.
It'd be a short battle.
So, Mr. McKee.
All right, stay up there. I'm coming from a little different angle because a couple of questions are going to be for engineering and for Angela, but you two. Listen, you know, you don't want us to vote on it right now, I don't think. But what I would like to do, you know, do you remember where Belmont is? The Belmont, I can remember when we first started on that, we went through 3 work sessions, and the first one was kind of like yours that you had, and I fought myself and a lot of others. We didn't say very much in that first work session.
We didn't give good guidance.
We didn't give you very good directions. Is there a way that we can work together, see if we can come up with a plan that the Planning Commission would be proud of and us be proud of, and work together on? I think you've heard some things. You heard more tonight than you heard on our on our work session. I don't know about the Planning Commission because I understand it went for a while, but you know, there's 2 or 3 things I think we could do. I know the first one on Belmont, everybody left there mad. Well, we didn't do that on yours, your first one. But I don't think we gave you proper directions in the very beginning. Yes, you'd contacted most of us after that, and we gave you some direction. I really would like for our Planning Commission and us work together with you guys and see if we can come up with something. I think that's the logical way to do it, to me. And I know you're going to come back that I got a certain timeline, but I can't worry about that part.
No, I
Keith.
certainly understand. Actually, the realtor representing RL Carries, I believe, is here tonight, but RL is not the typical seller I deal with. We deal with a company, this is more than information than y'all need, but we deal with them out of Ohio. There's just no negotiating anything that's in the contract. The terms are up in October, the 1st of October, the deal's done, whether we close it or not. So though that may be something that, you're right, might be entertaining to me, I don't know that I have that choice. And secondly, I do know from looking at it, I mean, one of the things that I hear over and over is the density. You know, we're so limited. We're paying for industrial land. We have a lot of road improvements. That's not, it isn't your concern, but it's just a fact. The costs are what they are. You know, we got $300,000 homes going in here that are 2,200 square feet at $130 a square foot. If we cut the density any, the values go up. I can't sell over that. I'm having to get an appraisal. As I've told some of you, we started in White Oak. My first 2 houses that went through there, the appraisals came in $20,000 low. Fortunately, I had people who had the money that write a check, and I have 2 good comps now to help that. And we're building really good values over there and have helped the adjacent neighborhood tremendously in values. The same could happen here, but it's just, unfortunately, I mean,
I can
certainly
understand that,
your
Keith. I
position
really
on
can.
that.
You and I have talked about that, and, you know, the way I look at this also, that you're looking at a minimum of 22, and I know when yours is, what you're asking is 22, I think, and, you know, we've been a little higher than that on most of them. It's a little bit different on this one here, I can see. But you're looking at $300,000, I think, what you're talking, because what you're going to be putting on the inside, that's $137 a square foot. And, you know, that's
a lot of money.
Well, yeah, it is. And, you know, of course, if you put that sprinkler system in, that's even more. But I don't,
Larry's fault, doesn't it?
you know, I really don't think that, I would like to see us work together with the Planning Commission, and you know, I think most of this board, but let's just be honest, I think it'd take it, a Planning Commission means a lot to us. They do their work. They got a job to do, and, you know, maybe we could work together on a work session that come out of this like this. You know, I've got a couple, how much are you gonna have to build this up for the sewer? You know, I don't know.
I can tell you exactly.
It's gonna be quite a bit.
It ranges anywhere from 3 or 4 feet. We have a high.
Because of the gravity feed.
Well, it's a combination. It's that and the storm drainage, because they didn't put underground storm drainage whenever they developed their site. Everything has to be discharged at grade. So you have, I won't go into the engineering of it, but you're raising it anywhere from 3 or 4 feet to Actually, Jason's looked at this too. I think it's 6 or 7 feet in some points.
About 6 foot deal on
Yeah. So there's some areas that we have to raise substantially. It's not a cheap site to do. It's
I
a
understand.
difficult site.
I understand.
Yeah.
But I just want you to, you know, I think you heard the same thing I did. I just don't think that I'm ready for it.
Can I,
I think we can be, I think we're closer than what we was, and I don't think it'll take that much more to get there, maybe. But sometimes it can be worked out when we're sitting down and talking, and you bringing it to us and what this is it, and we can bring it to you, and that's what it is, and we'll know whether we can go any further. That's mine.
Okay.
But I'd like to know how much more industrial area we have also from, so let's say, the north of Milton Wilson, other than this. I think this is all, right? This area north of Milton Wilson. I know we got right next to on the bank of Bartlett, we got some industrial, but that's all. Everything else is not, utilities are not ready for.
There's the adjacent property still next to it between there and 385.
Right, there's still
A little bit right here.
land pocketed throughout on Jet Lake and Gulfstream. But you're right, there's not another large industrial
That's right.
area.
Light industrial, and you know, I don't know what, most people don't even know what the uses are, that you can have in light industrial, but there's some that certain areas that I know we are, Milton Wilson, we wouldn't be very happy to have.
Well, there's a couple that gentleman sure wouldn't want to look out his front door and
No,
see if they could be put
well,
in
on
there.
Milton Wilson either. But, you know, I just don't think, let's just be honest, I don't think you want to do it like it is right now. I don't, you can let us vote on it, and then you can change it, what we're going to have anyway, before you can bring it back. But I just want to be complete honest with you. And it's not your fault completely, don't get me wrong, because and like I say it for the second time, I don't think we led you in the right direction at the very beginning.
Okay. With that being said, I would like to withdraw it, but I'd like to ask a question at the same time.
Okay,
Well,
I'd like
ask
to make
the
another
question
statement before at the
first.
same time. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, make
Okay.
your statement.
One thing, and maybe this would be saved for a work session, but one thing that I have, okay, so the density is just something we can't get too far past, but one thing that I've heard is the 50-foot lots. I've heard
50
that,
foot.
50-foot lots. That's something that I may look at and see how that affects us. It sounds like, from the things that seems pretty consistent. I mean, I do hear concerns about the parking and stuff, but I've seen also where this works very well. I know it apparently hasn't worked there, but there's a reason. We're following urban planning books, which are designed for this type of design. We're following, design guidelines on that. But I would just like to make the statement that I've heard that pretty regularly about the 50 feet, and it's something we would consider. The other question I would have is if there's any way we could expedite a work session of any sort to do anything like that. Of course, staff may not want to hear that, and I'm not asking to plan it today. I'm just asking that you consider that if we do with us tabling it. So,
Okay.
we're not tabling it up, but
We
withdrawing
can consider that with staff, and I like the recommendation by Mr. McKee. Just a couple of things.
Can I say that's one
Go
more
ahead,
question?
say one.
And I've got an email yesterday saying we've got enough zero lot lines in Arlington. And as far as I know, the many years I was on the planning commission and been on this board, Angela, do we have any zero lot lines in Arlington? No, we do not. So don't state that we do.
Minimal lot lines, but not
We
zero.
do have minimum, but we don't have zero, and this is not a zero. So if we put information out that is a zero, that fires our people up automatically. But can we change this around to get there? I don't know whether we can or not, but I'd like to try.
Well, our amenities in this are nearly $400,000 or more to put all these amenities in, which is something you don't get in a neighborhood that doesn't have open spaces. So there's a lot of money that goes into creating these amenities within the open spaces also.
Does that answer your
That's all.
question? Okay.
I've got other questions. If we do a work session, I can bring them up.
In regards to the alleys, just before the work session, if that's what we're going to do, but I did have a question, because one of the things, I know it's going to be brought up to street standards. If it's approved, it will be brought up to street standards. But the problem we've had, and this kind of goes with the fire truck also, not saying nothing's allowed back there, but when I've met with White Oak people, with garbage trucks being back there, and is there a way through, I mean, have you seen in your research through HOAs where people don't allow that back there as far as garbage pickup, and they have to pull their garbage up front? Because that's the heaviest piece of equipment you can have going through that thing
Well,
once
so
a week.
they have, I wish Bob was here to talk about tonight, but he's been sick. Bob Delhoff, our planner, and he actually lives in a product just like this.
He lives in Collierville,
Yeah,
yes.
and has the exact same product with the alleys behind, and they have the garbage trucks, and they just don't have the issues. They were put in properly.
Okay.
I will say this, with the alleys, putting 8 inches of soil cement's the same as the streets, the city streets are, putting another 2-inch lift of base asphalt and then 1.5 inches of surface. The problem that went on out in the other neighborhood
Yeah.
was you had that additional lift of 1.5 inch surface never went on. When that never went on for 10 years, you had the base layer is porous. It'll actually infiltrate and destroy your subbase. When you allow that to go on for that period of time and not get it down. Now, that being said, something that I can assure you that your board will, that your staff will require this time is a bond over that asphalt in that common open area. And I know for certain that surface is going down there, whether I'm doing it or somebody else is doing it. And it's not going to be at the town's expense. So I think that would be a safe bet at this point after conversations I've had on that.
Okay. All right, so it seems like you are going to withdraw this?
Yes.
All right, so does anybody have, I know if we're gonna, if we withdraw this, and we'll try to keep our questions to staff prior to a work session when that is scheduled. And the biggest question, kind of going back to Mr. McKee's, is we as a board, that's where I've struggled with this, is that I like the look of it. I actually like the placement of it. I've told you the density. I've asked you the density. But in my opinion, I don't live there like some of these people do, but I think I would rather see residential than industrial in my opinion, and I like the road improvements. So, but that's just me. And again, I'm trying to look to the people that actually live. It's easy for me to make decisions when I live on the other side of town. Now, if you brought something like this is just me personally, if you brought something like this on 150 acres or so, I would say absolutely no way. But when we're looking at pockets of land that I don't own, you don't own, none of these people in the audience own, that's where we have to look, as a board, collectively, we have to look at how are we gonna, that land's not gonna stay vacant forever, so we have to try to have that vision, which is tough. And so that's what I was just kind of echoing Mr. McKee's comments, is that we need to make sure that we're clear on some direction. And not saying we have to approve it or not approve it, but if we don't approve it or we don't come up to a solution where we have something, we can't be kicking ourselves in the tail later saying, well, why didn't we do this? Why didn't we make these changes? So that's why we got to all be open to the discussion. So I guess.
The only other thing, be prepared for a little bit of discussion in the work session on the mixers. I think I'm going to bring up some things on that. But we just, I just want to make sure we all know everything, not just, the outside parts of it. How many floors? What if we just said one floor? I don't know. Just be prepared.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
How many
stories?
How many stories?
For what? For the
mix.
Oh, for the mixed use?
Commercial.
Oh, yeah, we just set a limit of 3. But
Yeah, but what if we said one? We ended up two. We got to think what's going to be up there.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so.
Being I'm the only alderman from the other side of the tracks, I would much rather see that than a big industrial building, especially across from these homeowners that have been here 30 years. I'm almost 40 on this side of town, so, yeah.
All right, thank you.
All right, so with the withdrawal, what do we have to do officially? Nothing. This is withdrawn at the applicant's request. I just want to make sure we get it legally. And so we are not voting on this item, and we will look to staff to work with the developer on a possible work session coming up soon.
And I think he deserves for us to make this turnaround quick.
I agree.
Clarification, is that it's only work session, I heard with the planning commission, there's not really any time, I don't think, to work with us, a time frame to go back in front of the planning commissioners. Were you trying to get the planning commission and the board together, or were you trying to get?
Well, I don't know if we.
You're going to probably have to ask for an extension.
Well, my question was, this kind of follows yours. Am I better off to table it, at which time we could have, a work session between and come right back to this board, which would shorten the time frame, but you could still have the planning, the work sessions are open to anyone and everyone, so, or withdraw it. If I withdraw it, we have to go back. I don't know what I have to go back to.
if you've withdrawn it, we can bring it back in front of the board.
Still with a negative
My
vote.
concern is whether the board wants to hear the input from the planning commission
Yes.
At the work session
at
or?
the work session.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Can we get enough from the planning commission during the work session to know which direction to go?
I think we probably could, without an official, since they're just advisor, we probably could. I know we have one from the planning commission here back there, I think, but, oh, we got two. I'm sorry, I didn't see Don with. Three. Oh, three. Well, you're already up here. So, I mean, we already have some of that, but we can see. I know there's, I'm waiting for staff to,
We're trying to figure out whether we need another public hearing.
oh, if we need another public hearing?
The details we can.
Okay.
That work session needs to be this week or next week.
I'm fine next week.
I'm out of town
I'm back next week.
DRC's on the 11th.
after Tuesday.
We'll just have to try to get with
Here
staff
Monday and
as best as
Tuesday.
possible. There's one of those speeders we've been talking about.
They'll pick him up at the middle road.
All right. So we're just gonna have to leave it to staff to get with the board, planning commission, Mr. Grant, see if we can get a work session worked out in the next couple weeks. It may not work on your timeline exactly. I mean, I don't know. We'll do the best we can from our standpoint to try to coordinate it. And we'll just wait for staff. So this has been withdrawn at the applicant's request, awaiting a work session. All right. So we are now we got one more item. We got one more item on here, and then we're done. Item N, Resolution 2018-61 to authorize Mike Wisman in his capacity of the town of Arlington to enter into an Arlington Athletic Facility Provider Agreement with Arlington Recreational Soccer. Mrs. Owens.
Yes, sir, this is a standard agreement for your Arlington recreational soccer. I'm sure you're all aware, we had to do some rearranging of facilities based off of the construction at North Street Park. But staff recommends approval and all documentation is on file.
Further recommendation, do I have a motion to approve? Motion by Mr. Brooks, second by Mr. McKee. Any discussion or questions? Any objection for that soccer agreement? Seeing none, that item passes. Any other new business? Mrs. Owens, do I have a motion to pay the bills?
Yes.
I have Mr. Harmon, second by Mr. McKee. Any objection? No. Bills are paid. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Motion and a second. This meeting's adjourned. Thank you.